but that was like their time. So in turn, like if I trade that off, when you come in and I'm like, yo, we got to figure this out. It's just that give and take. Like it can't just be about you and your agenda. And probably immeasurable is like, how enjoyable is this for you? Is this something you want to come back to? Is this something that like you can tell that they're excited to be a part of, not a chore? And just being who you are as a coach all the time matters. You can't be one version on the field, one version off the field. You can't be a version with the kids and a version with your parents. It's you, and people see that and can tell.
Hello and welcome to the Reflective Coach podcast with me, Coach Luca. I hope you've been enjoying all the recent content that has been out there, and I'm so delighted every week that an episode is released, produced and created that I get to watch the episodes back. But not only that, I'm able to create new episodes for yourselves, which adds to a fantastic guest list which is growing and growing every week. Not only that, it expands learning, it expands that horizon, that growth, that all-round learning that you're adding to your journal. In this week's episode, I'm delighted to welcome Lora Gralheer on the podcast, who had such wonderful insight. Her career didn't start out by on the grass, but it started out in a background that has allowed her to take it on the grass and off the field, which really contributes to the organisation, herself, her team, and her players in terms of that context and support, where she can give the players that magnitude of support to model themselves in a perspective that can really be beneficial to them in reaching out to other organisations looking for scholarships that can help them find prospective jobs, the opportunity to grow, to learn on their platforms, what she's able to contribute towards her club, her organisation, herself, how she can give these skills on the grass and off the field a wider combination, and how this magnitude of excellent opportunities, which has led her to where she is now, continues to lead to so many opportunities and fundamental areas of consideration within the future. Now, it's great because Laura really talks about her experiences and what she's able to bring, but then we were able to talk about what she does as a coach and her wider support that she's able to give the athletes through her experiences and her skill set in terms of where she is now. But whilst we illuminate and come back towards the grass and on the pitch, we spoke about her as a coach. She talked about why coaching, what has led her into coaching, happy accidents, tactics, field of views and people, trade-offs and giving and taking with people, building those relationships. What can you give them? What can they give you? Sometimes we need to have trade-offs, and it's not always the most beneficial outlook. And this is why I love the Reflective Coach podcast, because it's so many considerations, so many reflections, and this creates the kind of magnitude of thinking which I really want to bring you, as well as the podcast, to really help grow and identify these areas. She talked about how enjoyable coaching is, how enjoyable it is to be on the grass, to take away those experiences, that long-term outlook, the type of coach that she is, growth points, moments of success, ways to see the best version of others, the best version of the athletes and yourselves, to empower others and to feel empowered. Did she fall into coaching? What is the strategy? What makes a good group? That is such an important consideration. So do we look at the controllables? Do we look at the personalities? How do we recruit? If we take away so many other personalities to mix and match a group, essentially, in terms of having so many different personalities, which really does help, rather than having 35 robotic players all in the same mindset, how this can really help improve and extend opportunities as a group, and how this can be modeled to create a good group through excellence of coaching and people management, which has led to those trade-offs which can really help build that group. She talks about modelling behaviour, what can be detrimental, and losing your identity and how that can really support in terms of rebuilding that identity, establishing yourself, that perspective you're able to give, taking ownership of your learning. So as I continue to break this down and add to what we spoke about, we talked about activities, when the moment calls, choices, pausing moments, intentional thinking, spotlight and impact, intentional feedback, sets of eyes and support, intentional moment and spaces, global view, grounding moments, additional clarity and key questions. Wow, this episode is absolutely layered and jam-packed full of content and information, and I can't wait to keep sharing this with you beyond when this episode is released. There are so many key considerations and reflections. I hope you continue to add to your reflective journal. This is a fantastic insight to Lora, as well as what she's able to bring her athletes and the organisation that she works. Now, continue to add, but please help the podcast by subscribing, liking, and following, as well as leaving comments. There are some key platforms I'd really like you to consider and really help out upon. This is Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. It also extends to Flickr, TikTok, Podcast Addict, and a number of other social media platforms which you can really find through the Linktree access which is there. But please leave that like, that subscribe, and that comment. It does help the podcast. I am Anthony_Luca96. This is at TRC Podcast _ on Twitter. It's the Reflective Coach Podcast everywhere else. Drop that like, drop that follow, drop that subscribe, leave the comment. It really does help. In this week's episode, there's Lora Gralheer, and I hope you enjoy and continue to add to your reflective journal. It's always a pleasure to introduce new episodes and release them, and always allow the community of the Reflective Coach Podcast to build. This is Coach Luca on the Reflective Coach Podcast, and always a big thanks from me. See you soon.
Sometimes it just doesn't work, and you got to be okay enough to say, yeah, my bad, hold on, you guys got a drink, let me start this over, because we're not getting where we want to. And that's, I think, as a coach, something that is tough. Like, you don't want to be the one that's wrong, but like, you expect your players to try things and they're going to mess up. So if you can't do that as a coach, like, model that behavior for them. I've got headphones, or is this okay? What?
No, this is perfect as long as you're happy.
Yeah, it's fine with me. I have headphones as a backup in case the sound is a little choppy. You never know in an apartment complex what you're going to get, so.
That's right, no problems. Yeah, no, sounds completely fine.
Perfect.
So, how's your day been so far?
Not too bad. I thought it was going to storm, so I got up early and went to the farmer's market and just walked around. So now it's just hanging out at home. So easy Saturday, one of the few I have off. So I'm taking advantage of doing as little as possible.
Exactly, make the most of it before the hectic schedule kicks back in and Saturdays become non-existent again.
Yeah, weekends aren't weekends when you're a youth soccer coach, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was speaking to someone else the other day, and they were saying they had some downtime as well and a few Saturdays off, and they were saying how they were coaching at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, I don't miss getting up at like 7:30, getting down the pitch for like 8, 8:30, and just having like a 7-day week where you're up early every morning. That was such a killer.
No, thankfully most of my stuff is always in the evening. Like, I think I normally get up between like 9:30 and 10:30, so I'll take it. I'm not known for being a morning person. People bug me about it all the time. They're like, you hate mornings. I'm like, yeah, I do. But like, if I have to be there, I'll be there. It's not like I won't show up. But like, yeah, if I have a preference, for sure, let's go later. So no, I broke my own rule and got up and walked around downtown. I'm in Des Moines, I'm like just outside of Des Moines, Iowa, and they have one of like the best farmers markets in the U.S. So I was like, all right, let's wander around, let's grab some stuff and get some snacks and do a little something different.
Yeah, no, sounds perfect. Do you have much on after this, or?
No, I've got to do some like little cleaning and organizing. There's probably some stuff I need to do just so I'm ahead of the game for next week. And nothing too much. This is like, I think, one of 2 or 3 weekends this summer that I like don't have a camp, don't have to go anywhere. I'm not coaching. So I am relishing that and doing just the basics, like the normal people, like chores and errands versus like, how do I cram it all in around 3 games in a training session and a game that's at 2 games at the same time at different complexes that you can't possibly get to, but we're going to try somehow. So I'll take this. No rushing is nice.
Yeah, definitely nice, really nice. And, this is a side of, the coaches that, parents and other stakeholders, the kids, the players, etc., don't see because, you're working full time, you're watching video, you're, recruiting, traveling to camps, looking at, getting in touch with other recruits, speaking to other coaches, reflecting, learning, out planning sessions, taking, equipment or traveling and then living your life on top of it, then trying to find some downtime and then do all the usual things as well. And it's tough. It's a real tough gig.
Yeah, no, there's definitely more timing pieces to it than people realize. I have like weird free hours. So it could be like a random Wednesday and I'm free till like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But then it's like, I just don't want to do anything. But then if you ask, like, especially during our fall season, I think I was on the field for like 10 sessions a week and those don't start until 5. So it was like 5 to 9:30, 10 o'clock every night. And then you get home and it's 10 o'clock and you've just been on the field for 5 hours. So you're like, okay, let's grab a snack. And then the next thing you know, you're like, okay, now we got to shower because we've just been like sweaty and gross and on the fields for forever. And then it's 11:15, 11:30, and people are like, why are you going to bed so late? I'm like, because I'm like just now shutting down. There's a reason I'm not up at 7 a.m. because I don't like it. There's no way I'm going to bed before midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. So there's definitely like the side to it that they don't get. They're like, what do you do all day? I'm like, try and get ready to do everything all night. Like, absolutely.
And do you like being this busy and having it hectic and everything going on, or would you prefer like more of a balance and then a little bit more downtime planned in if you could?
I probably do better when it's a little busier just because it keeps me on schedule. So I know like if I only have 3 hours that I'm going to have to get like X, Y, and Z done. So on a day like today, it's like, oh, I can just do that in like an hour because I don't have to go anywhere versus a day where I have a game where it's like, okay, I've got a game in 2 hours. So if I want to get this done, have to prioritize it. So there's a blessing and a curse to it with how it keeps you a little bit organized. But then there's days where you're like, oh my gosh, it was so nice to just not do anything and just sit here and, be lazy and watch a movie. Or like I built a Lego set the other day for the first time in forever and just like sat there listening to a podcast and building a Lego set. Like you don't have time for that during the season, but it was a nice little break now.
A much needed one, but it's nice when you can find the moments to do the things that we miss doing, like, most year.
Yeah. And I think like it's just weird soccer hours because everyone's like, well, what do you know about Iowa? Because I've lived here just over a year. And I'm like, not a lot. I work nights and weekends. They're like, well, do you try any restaurants? I'm like, when? Like, there's soccer practice time. Or like, what do you do on the weekend? I coach. Or if I'm not coaching, I'm about to coach. And then I'm like, I don't really want to do something. Or I just finished coaching. And then it's like, I am gross. I've been on a field for the last 3 hours. So it's a unique schedule, especially like in youth soccer when you can only coach when kids aren't in school. So, that's your window. And that's the window when everyone else is like, yeah, it's free time. I'm like, no, that's the work window. Like that's the time we got to go.
Absolutely. And that's the way the cookie crumbles in the coaching world for you. So why coaching and what has led you into coaching?
I think it kind of just fell into it at a certain point in time. My college career fell short in terms of like injury and some mental health stuff. And I just kind of walked away from the game. And then when I graduated, I have this great degree in chemistry and was like, I don't know if I really want to go into a lab right away. Let me see what else I can do. And I called a coaching friend and was just like, can you find a team? I just want to get involved with it again. And the more I did it, the more I was like, I could see this working. Like, let's see if I can make this work. And like, probably much to the chagrin of my mom at the time, I was like, I know that all my friends are going to like med school or dental school or farm school, and I could go get a master's or a PhD, but I think I'm going to see if I can make soccer work. And it was just a lot of like being willing to go through kind of like the non-fun side, the non-shiny moments, like teams that weren't necessarily great, jobs that weren't necessarily perfect. Hey, you got a third team? Perfect. You need someone to fill in at a private session? Let me take it. There's a little summer camp in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky. I'm there. Like, just finding a way to make it work, finally work my way into a full-time job. And then it was just like, as long as I can make this work, I'm going to make it work. It's been a blend of coaching, marketing, communications, admin, you name it, just kind of finding ways to make it fit. And now that I've done it, I'm like, I don't know if I could ever envision being in that like 9-to-5 world where I like can't work in a t-shirt and don't have a hoodie that I get given once a year. Like that to me it's a great balance to things.
Yeah, that's definitely something which I miss. I had a full-time coaching job and, we got to a point where we were starting about 10 o'clock, so you had that little bit of a lull in the morning, get in and then deliver your sessions and variation sessions, and just being in like a kit, especially a day like today, whereas now I'm teaching full time, I'm in a shirt, I'm in, the formal attire, and when you sort of in the classroom, you're staring out on the grass, like, I wish I was out there rather than stuck behind you, and so I'm definitely envious of your position right now.
To be fair, there's probably more time that I spend behind a computer than people envision. So I do all of our like marketing and communications for our club, and the club that I work at. So I'm in a community club. I'm in Ankeny, Iowa, just north of Des Moines. We partner with another club to have a GA and an ECNL program. So I do all of our marketing, communications, graphics, everything for that one. And then I work in our local club to do all the marketing and communications. We have 2 different satellite clubs that are like an hour, 2 hours north, and another one an hour south. I help them with their marketing. And then because I didn't like the website, and I proposed to my boss that we should redo it all, knowing that it would fall on me, but maybe not realizing how much I had really signed up for. So like this winter, I rebuilt our GA and ECNL website, and then took our 3 satellite websites and combined them into one. So there's probably more time than people think that I spend on a computer doing emails, like looking at a screen. So it is definitely a nice balance that, if I spend 3 or 4 hours on the computer during the day, I'm going to get to spend 3, 4, 5 hours outside. So I get a little bit of both, and I'm not just stuck in one or the other.
And that's an incredible experience to, be involved in the website and, moving that all together. Just having that as a project and part of the portfolio, that's incredible.
Was like a skill set built by necessity. I was at a club in Louisville that we actually rebranded during COVID. And part of it, we paid for an advertising company, and then COVID hit, and we're looking at it and we're like, this is a big expense now to have this advertising company. They did an incredible job of getting us started, of getting the website started, of getting the branding pieces put together. And we hit a point where we're like, okay, we got to cut some costs. Can we take it from here? So it was kind of like trial by fire. And I think a lot of that stuff, the more you spend time on it, it's not as scary as people make it out to be. Like there's an undo button for a reason. So there have definitely been times where I've sat there and just had like YouTube on one screen, like watching how someone does it. And then I'm playing with it on another screen. And I'm like, just don't look at this page for an hour. Let me see if I can figure it out. So it's been nice to be able to blend some different things. So it's not just soccer all the time. There's times where I get to like go into marketing mode and look at it from that side of things. And then, I think it maybe helps grant a bit of perspective to what I'm doing on the field. There are times that it probably hurts me because I look at it from a marketing point of view and I'm like, what does this really look like from the outside looking in? And I'd be better off just doing what I would want to do as a coach. But then I think there are times too where I'm like, it makes you more cognizant of the fact that there are people always watching. And like, how do you make sure that, be genuine in your interactions, not just for the picture at the end, but like know that there's a piece to it too where it matters. And there are people that are paying attention to the little things that you're doing, and, the little silly stories I post on Twitter about some weird thing a kid did one day, and making sure that like it represents me, the organization I'm working for, and then like the players that I'm working with in a good light too.
And it's good because then you've got this whole skill set, as you said, and what you're building and combining, and it gives you multiple perspectives then when you are on a pitch. And sometimes we look at people and we're like, oh, I wish you had that perspective and you could look at the wider picture. But then sometimes having too much of a perspective and that mindset can literally take away from what you want to focus on, and be like, oh, I wish I didn't have to look at it like data and analytics, or look at it from marketing. And then because it can take away from what you're doing. And there's some things which in my role I'm like, right, this is actually taking me away from what I was hired to do. And then it's difficult then, because then you're like, oh, this is further away, and my motivation can be up and down. But do you find that, is it a case of where your role could move into marketing full time and then you're moving away from coaching? Would that frustrate you in that way then, or?
I think it'd be weird to not be on a soccer field. So I'm like just starting my second year here in Iowa. Before the move here, there was a lot of like kind of what do I want to do next. I'd hit kind of a deadline and end sign at the place that I was. Kentucky is always home, but I'd been there forever. So it's just like, all right, at this point in time, I'm like 33, 34 years old. If I don't make a change and do something different, I'm never going to know. Like, I'm not going to move when I'm 38. I'm not going to move when I'm 40 and try something new. But like 33, I can still make it work. So I kind of took this leap of faith, knowing that like there were a bunch of different pieces to it, and going through the job hunt
made it more interesting. So I applied for jobs that were more administrative and on the back end. I applied for jobs that were in the college level, in the youth level, just coaching and marketing, coaching and like, so it kind of gave me a little bit of variety. And I think that's what I've appreciated a lot about the role that I'm in, is that I get to do both. It's obviously not every job. I think it'd feel weird to me if I was just on the field and I never got to do anything on the back end and didn't get to be a part of some of those decisions or some of how we represent ourselves, just because I've done it for so long now. But I think if I like had to be in the office, like doing graphics and making websites and, you know, all of that stuff all the time, there's a part of me that would absolutely miss like being on the field, interacting with the players, being a part of that side of it too. So for as long as possible, I would like to keep both, but I also know like eventually you can't be on the field 10 hours a day and still feel okay as a human. So it's also like kind of in the back of my mind that, you know, 15 years down the road, if I'm like, okay, I don't want to be 60 and on the field, but I can still make a website. So it kind of helps me have a little bit of my own type of backup plan, that there are other skill sets that I can fall back on. So I will stay on the field as long as I can, but it'll be nice to know that I can find ways to stay involved in the game that don't necessarily mean kind of boots on the ground all the time too.
I love it. And, you know, we can plan and we can strategize and, you know, do a chemistry degree, and we can go off to university and college and do everything to try and set ourselves up for life. But realistically, as you said, you've fallen into coaching. Now you're doing marketing, which you've sort of fallen into. So realistically, you've got a coaching career with a chemistry degree, but you could go into marketing full time or building websites or having, you know, freelance work come out. And you've already got a backup plan or a business which you could launch just from going into coaching and finding out what you want to do. I think it's incredible the way life can work out sometimes.
Oh yeah, it's definitely been a little bit of a happy accident at times. So the first time I ever did anything with social media, I was in Louisville. I was tutoring student athletes to help pay the bills. So I worked with the University of Louisville in their like academic department through the athletics, and would teach student athletes like math, chemistry, science, like that type of stuff. And then I would go out to the field. I had this second team, and we were a very good second team. We weren't going to win any big awards, but like for us and where we were, we felt really good about it. And I looked at the social media after we had just finished the season, where like these kids that people kind of counted out had gone undefeated. And I'm like, dude, can we at least get a picture to like recognize them? Like, it doesn't have to have me in it at all. You don't have to say my name anywhere, but like recognize these kids doing this, because it's so easy to just say, well, the first team went to this big event, won this big trophy, did this. Like, recognize these other kids that are doing it and doing great at their level and excelling and having fun. And they're like, well, we don't really have the time to do that. And I was like, well, if you pay me like a couple $100 a month, I think I can do it. Like, I can send tweets. This is fine. So then it went from doing that to like, okay, well, can you help on the indoor facility side? I'm like, yeah, sure, I can do this. So I kind of like over time talked my way into it, which is actually how I got my first job. And we hit a point where it was like, I'm in the office 2-3 days a week doing different marketing pieces, doing this, that, the other, trying to help us promote like what we do, who we are, what we have going on, whether it's from a player point of view or a coaching point of view or events that we have coming up. And I like sat down with them and I'm like, you keep hiring all these other people. Can I get a job here? Like, I will make my own title. I'll be the director of communications, but like, let me handle this stuff full time so that we actually have eyes on it. So I kind of like made my own job. And then I've been able to translate that into other pieces as I've gone. And it's, I don't know. I don't think I ever could have mapped it out. I think it just kind of fell in place, and it's been one of those like, you know what? I bet I can learn how to do this. Mm-hmm. So let's see. And for now, I haven't bitten off too much more than I can chew. So there is room for me to grow and learn about a lot of other stuff, but so far so good.
And it sounds good and it sounds exciting, and well done for everything that you have done and achieved so far. But, you know, even if you've got a player who's, say, at the college level or a level that you're working with, and they want to progress and take that next step and they're moving on, and, you know, the time at the college or whatever is finishing naturally, it's great because they could come to you and be like, oh, right, Laura, how could I move forward? Or how could you help market me? Or how can I help push that out? So it's another skill set which you can bring to the players and support them, where, you know, you might work with a head coach or a coaching team and then they can do all the on-the-field stuff and the tactics and so on. But then you could help on that next level. So essentially you are forming part of a perfect coaching team by what you can bring by being that all-round person which you are.
Yeah. I think there's a blessing and a curse to it. So part of my role now within our Girls Academy setup is I'm going to be like what we deem the player success coach. So basically, instead of having 4 training sessions a week, they'll have 3 training sessions a week.
And on that fourth day, which I think is actually in the middle of the week, so maybe not technically the fourth day, but they'll do 30 minutes with a person that we have that's going to do sports performance. A lot of it is like body weight and plyometrics and like little things that they can do just to be a better athlete. They're going to work with two of our female coaches, one for the older, one for the younger, on the like technical side of the game. So getting more specific into the technical pieces that like when you're running a training session, you don't want to spend 20 minutes doing technical work on something, but it's still a skill that they need. So go in, run your session, the other 3 days of the week, however you want to, but know that on this day, this is the technique side of it. So this is the reps, the numbers, the how do you get, if you're an attacking player, how do you get 20, 30, 40 shots on goal? Probably not within a session, but when you come on this day, you can. And then the third piece of it is my role, which we're developing, figuring out, and I'm sure again it'll be ups and downs, but it's a lot of the off the field stuff. So whether it is you want to play collegiately, what are the steps you start to take? How do you manage more like school life, soccer balance? What are pieces of this that we can look at from a mental health point of view to check in and see like, hey, we're a month and a half in and the lull is coming, how do we fix this? So it's cool that I get to do some type of that stuff, but there are other times where it's also like, yeah, I'm still a coach though. Like just because I do this other stuff, don't discount what I can bring to you on the field. So again, it's been really cool. I don't know if I ever could have said this is the role that I'd end up in or this is the direction that things would go in. But I've been pleasantly surprised with the opportunities that I've been presented kind of on both sides of the game for sure.
Definitely, yeah, sound really interesting, and what you're doing is good. Is there out of the four pillars, psychological and social, technical, tactical, and then physical, out of those four pillars, is there one that interests you the most?
Probably like the psychological piece of it. I think like if I was going to do more school, it'd probably be around like sports psychology and that type of stuff. There are plenty of books you can read that give you just some like food for thought, and that's a piece of the puzzle that you can control on your own and without paying for another degree, which to me is fine. I got a master's, I got a bachelor's, I don't need any more certificates. We're good. But no, I think it's such a big piece, and it's a piece that isn't easy to put a finger on. So definitely like probably ties into the chemistry background of like wanting to solve the puzzles and like figure out the equations and all that stuff. It's the same thing when you look at like the sports psych side of things. It's not a cookie cutter thing. Like tactics are tactics, and yes, they ebb and flow, but like at the end of the day, there's 11 people. There's only so many ways you can put 11 people on a field, but every single player you see is different, and where they came from is different, and how they got there is different. Even in, I'm working in Ankeny, Iowa. It's not huge, but the stories of these kids and the things they bring with them to training every day are always different. So whether it's 10 minutes at the end of practice where we joke around and they end up saying something about how like, yeah, this week was great, I aced this test, this went well, I'm looking forward to this. Or, sometimes you get the inverse where it's not happy stories. I think the best way is to have kids feel safe and feel comfortable. And that psychological piece can sometimes be understated when, to me, it's like at the forefront of anything that I do. Are they happy? Are they healthy? And are they excited to be here? The rest that follows, you'll get the best soccer in the world out of those kids because they feel good about it and good about themselves.
And out of that, being safe, happy, and comfortable, how do you instill that and how do you measure it?
I don't know if it's something that is ever very formal in my mind. I think it's just approaching like the way I'm talking to you now is the same way I talk to the players. So if it's, this is Lora off the field and then I step on the field and I'm someone different, it's tough because then you don't know where to draw lines. So I am who I am with them. I am sarcastic and easygoing because it is just a game. There are going to be moments of intensity where we're all like, okay, yeah, that wasn't what we wanted. But I think it's a lot of that. Like I had a group this year of U18 girls that like, they're just goofballs and they're super weird. But when you let them just be weird and enjoy one another, the soccer they play is pretty solid. They were really competitive at the level that they played at, won a lot of, events at the level that we were at. But part of what I had to concede was that when they get a drink at practice and we're going from 8 to 9:30 at night, they're going to ask to stargaze. And so our water breaks took about 5 minutes because there was a stargazing portion. So I gave up 3 minutes of practice every time they took a water break for them to lay on their backs and talk to one another and try and count stars, which when you look through stadium lights, you can't see stars. So I think they told me the most they ever saw was 4. So it's not like there was something impressive about it, but that was like their time. So in turn, like if I trade that off, when you come in and I'm like, yo, we got to figure this out. It's just that give and take. Like it can't just be about you and your agenda and the things that you have on the to-do list. Sometimes stargazing is more important than getting to your fifth coaching point that day. And it sounds dumb, but the amount of compliments that I get based on how a player feels and how excited they are to be a part of it, like I would trade that for, that's the best part of it, to have a parent say, yeah, she's really excited about being here. Like she loved being a part of this team. And it's not always because the team's successful, but that to me is like, okay, we're doing the right stuff. So that's probably immeasurable, is like, how enjoyable is this for you? Is this something you want to come back to? Is this something that like you can tell that they're excited to be a part of, not a chore, not I just finished school and then work and now I'm here. It's genuinely like, this is a good time. This is my break. This is when I enjoy it. So I don't know. It's informal in a way. There's probably some times where I have to sacrifice. Could we be a little bit better tactically? Yeah. Over the course of the season, if we didn't spend 3 to 5 minutes a day stargazing, it would add up to a lot more time on the field. But I have a bunch of kids that love it and like love their team and are excited to be a part of it and are, sad when the season's done, as opposed to those kids that like it finishes and they're like, oh my gosh, what a relief. I get a break now. These kids were like, this sucks that it's done. Like that was awesome. So I don't know. It's tough to say if there's anything specific, but I think just being who you are as a coach all the time matters. You can't be one version on the field, one version off the field. You can't be a version with the kids and a version with their parents. It's you, and people see that and can tell. And I think for me, it's gone well so far. And I'm happy with kind of who I am as a coach and what I bring to the table in that regard.
And that's the important thing, being happy with who you are and what you're doing on the field, because, the moment that you try to get changed or people try to chip things away from you, or they're like, right, you have to do it this way and have to do it that way, you're not bringing what you do as a coach to the field and what you do into the group. And I think that's another important point, by that enjoyment of the kids, because, if they're there enjoying it and they're there happy and they want to come to training rather than it being a slug and trying to be forced to be there, or they're tired, or they're missing sessions, then realistically, by incorporating what they want to do and bringing together a group, and even if they are stargazing for 5 mintes, it gives perfect opportunity just for them to have some downtime and then go, right, we can go again now, rather than a full intense session, as well as giving that time to just have a chat. So whilst you might have a group of 10 and 3 or 4 girls are looking up, that gives you time to speak to 3 or 4 girls, or 1 or 2, and then that 5 minutes can really make that difference. How's your day gone? Or you're right, how are you? And sometimes we don't always get that in a session, so that people side is really important, because we forget about the people because we're too busy, right, straight into the session, bang, warm up, into a technical small-sided game, we go home, make sure the objectives are met, and then it ends up becoming robotic as a sense, and then we're not bringing what we want, because we're just going, right, form, bang, 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 and then that's how the sessions sort of run over a period of time, and it's difficult.
Yeah. And I think there are times too where it's like, I look at it and I'm like, we could have gotten more out of today. So it is a balance. And I think that there are probably times that, like, if you ask me, I'm going to err on the side of like, did they leave feeling good about the day over did I leave feeling good about checking all the boxes, which it may not always be the right way. I think there are times where it does need to be a little bit more intense and a little bit more like, hey, today is a day where there is a point and there is a purpose, and we got to be a little bit more specific about what we're trying to get done. And that's probably a growth point for me, to continue to work on, like, finding more of that balance. How do I continue to have those, like, yeah, we needed to get through these 3 things and we got through them, without taking away that other piece of it. But I think, like, that's kind of my starting point. And then, where we go from there, how we get to the next place from there, depends on the group, depends on the age. I think something in youth soccer is I'll get a call to work with the little ones over the winter. So it's 4, 5, and 6-year-olds on a basketball court indoors. Like, what do you do with those kids versus, I got the opportunity to work with our U19 GA team, which is, 10, 12 young women that are going to go play collegiately at every level of the game. So, I've worked with All-Americans. I've worked with, Gatorade Player of the Year, this, that, and the other. And then I've worked with a 4-year-old whose most fun part of soccer is that they got their soccer ball, and that was their highlight. I kicked it. I'm like, yes, that's great. So, it's a wide span of things, and it's that constant little need for recalibrating and giving yourself some standard of success that isn't just wins, losses, that type of thing.
I love that, and I'm just making a note of that. So if you see my head dropping down this, the key moments I'm trying to write down, because they are great, and I want to, capture them and go off that. And
Yeah.
it sounds very similar to what my system manager does, because we ended up transitioning from one club where we were firmly on 3G, so we, never on grass really, except on a game day where we might play at a different club, etc. And we transitioned to another club which were all grass, your standard typical fields, maybe maintained by the local council, etc. And they weren't the greatest of facilities, so they were very muddy, very boggy. And we had one young kid, which was actually his kid, and he loved mud, he loved outdoors, he was just a kid. So at the end of training, if it rained the night before, there'd be massive sludgy puddles, and then the assistant coach would literally incorporate, right, run in the mud, in the mud now, get absolutely hammered on the way out of training. But they enjoyed it and they loved it, and it brought them together as a team, and they were like having memories, and little things like that can help build those dynamics and really take away from the enjoyment of a team. Although the parents were in best pleased because they were getting these muddy kids into their car.
Yeah, no, I try and stay away from the mud. Sometimes it's better than others. Like I had a U16, U15 team this spring that they finished practice, and we were like the only team left on the field. They're like, see that puddle? And I know what's coming next. And I'm like, yeah, I see it. I was like, just tell your parents I didn't say you needed to. And you just see them just whoof across the field. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, I need to send a message to the parents, like bring an extra towel when they pick their kid up. What are we doing? But again, it was like that 5 minutes at the end of training, or like when we were grabbing the gear at the end, that they're, jetting through puddles in the field. Like that's the stuff that makes like the Instagram posts. They're real. They're be real for the day. Like those are the highlights. They didn't post like, look at the technical development that I had today. They're like, you see all the mud that I just went through? That was awesome. So, even with some of your older kids, that there are still those little like childhood moments of joy where they're like, yeah, I do want to play kickball one day and just like run around and have fun. Yeah, there has to be those little touch points where it's a reminder that like it is a game and we all started playing because it was fun and we enjoyed it. And you can't lose that along the way.
Of course, and that's just got a point in my head then, because there was a young player that I used to coach at under 7s level, and he's probably about under 11s, under 12s now, and he has his own dedicated Instagram account for a player, so him and his dad both follow me on Instagram and I follow them, and all you see on this kid's Instagram is training tonight, playing, won this award, scored this goal, done this in training, and that's all his profile is. So essentially they're trying to market him as a really good player and all this, which is great.
Yeah.
But then it's not actually showing who he is as a person, what he enjoys doing, what moments is he having with his teammates away from just all this measured success to them. And that's the hard thing then, because you're like, right, you are literally turning this player into a robot, and all it is train, game, train, game, train, and it's not actually showing the highlights of who he is, and that's the shortfall for me. And when I'm talent IDing and recruiting and scouting, etc., I want to see the all-round person and who they are and what they could bring to the team and the group, for example.
No, I think it's an important piece of it. I think we talk about like every person has what they bring to the table. Like it shouldn't be something that they leave at the door. So, I'm going to have kids that are all in on that. I'm going to have kids that are super serious, where like we're going to provide them a bit of brevity and they start to understand that like, okay, I don't have to be super intense at everything. Like I can laugh in the middle. And then there's going to be some kids that maybe are a little bit more lackadaisical. And then they know going into this small-sided game, they're playing against the kids with a little bit more intensity. And they're like, okay, I got to go now. Like I gotta step it up. So it's providing them the opportunity to still be themselves and still show themselves on a soccer field. Again, I think like the best way to see the best version of a player is when you actually see who they are as a person as well. Like if you just turn them into a player that receives with one foot, passes with the other, opens up, does these movements, like this is the pattern we want to play in, you lose some of that, like the special moments, because that's where you get the kid that feels empowered enough to do something ridiculous that in your head as a coach, you're like, please don't do that. Please don't do that. What are you doing? And then they pull it off and you're just like, okay, yeah, nope, you were right. But you have to give them that leeway to be themselves before they're willing to do that. Because if they're worried that they're not allowed to be them, they're not going to try it. And some of the time they try it and it's going to go horribly. And then they're going to look at you and we're both going to be like, yeah, we know, not the one. But the good moments that you get out of it, like, you can't replicate that. You can't make it happen any other way than just saying, like, I trust you. Do you. Like, you go do you, and we're going to talk about it later.
And that's where some of the like the most fun, the most magical, the most special moments come from, is just that freedom and them feeling okay to go out and give it a go.
Absolutely, and for me, when I talk to every participant on the podcast, I in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what are the listeners taking away and what they're thinking of. So for me, I'm thinking, coaches who are trying to get onto it, or professionals, or parents, or players maybe. And for me, everything that a coach like yourself says, there's an important message behind it, and the special moments is the exact important message that you just there from that context, because we're trying to push players, or they're trying to get them, and they're trying to get into academies and coaching sessions and constant train one-to-ones and so on, and there's nothing wrong with that, but don't forget that they're a kid, and don't forget that they got special moments, because suddenly they're 7 and boom, they're 17, and you can't go back and recreate those moments. You can't go back and be part of the same team. You can't go back and have that time with a coach. And for me, that's part of my philosophy, and I'm like, right, I've got an hour now with this player. This hour has to be enjoyable. It has to be impactful, because in 10 years, when they've moved on and I've moved on, I want them to remember and look back and go, I actually enjoyed doing that, and I didn't do it because of that sludge or being forced into, or it becoming quite tiresome, etc. So I think what you're doing is great, and what you bring, and I think you're doing a fantastic job.
I try. I also think like a lot of credit has to go to the players too. Like there are probably players that hate me as a coach because that's how I act. Like I'm not gonna get on them and scream at them and yell at them. It's like I'm here to meet you where you're at. So there are some kids that are like, no, I need you to yell at me more. And I'm like, I'm probably not the coach for you. Like if you need someone screaming at you to like get you going, this is not the one. So, I think it goes both ways. So there are probably kids that hate the way I do it, and I think that's totally fair. Everybody's not going to be everybody's coach. But no, I think just providing them with that opportunity, and then these kids like buying into it, because for so long you're told like, you got to be in a straight line. It's got to be this way. It's got to be that way. And I'm just like, some of the time it's like, you know what? I trust you. You do you. And let's see where we end up. So a lot of it does get put on the players in that regard. And parents are like, you did a great job. And I'm like, I have not kicked a meaningful ball in a game in a decade. Like they won, they did the work, they did this. I said, I encourage them. I create hopefully an environment where they feel safe to do what they do and know that they're going to be supported, good, bad, or otherwise. And it takes a lot from them. I think at first when they start working with me to realize that like, okay, yeah, this is mine. Like I don't want it to be super coach driven. I want it to be player led, and that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, just based on the group that you have in there. But it definitely takes a kid willing to be that person and say, okay, yeah, I'm going to own it. So it's not a singularly coaching driven thing for sure.
So in that essence, then, you make the perfect assistant coach and a perfect head coach, because whilst you might have a head coach who might scream at them and do the tactics side, etc., you bring the people side to them, you bring that support, you bring, let's take the intensity off when we need to, or you're a perfect head coach where you're like, right, I can manage the players, and this is how it's going to look, and this is how we support the players on and off the field, but you could do the tactics, etc. So you've got that perfect balance of what you could bring and how you could step into different roles. So I think that's a great skill set.
No, I try to. And again, I think it's one of those things that like it's not done with a lack of tactics and details. Like I think that sometimes a piece that gets overlooked is like, you let them stargaze. I'm like, yeah, I let them stargaze because we had already gotten like what we needed to get done. Like we're going to play. So I had a U12 girls team, and every Thursday, the first 15, 20 minutes of it was soccer tennis. And everybody's like, I can't believe you let them play soccer tennis again. I'm like, yeah, but did you see that like what used to be if you served, like if you hit the first volley in, that was your point because the kid couldn't return it, is now like 3 or 4 rounds back and forth. So now when a ball comes them out of the air in a game, they've got 2 touches and it's on the ground. Like there, I think maybe is more thought than people think into making things fun but still productive. So that's kind of the back end of it on my side, is that like, okay, yeah, it might not look like the same training session that you're running, but the same points are still there. Like we're just going to do it in a different way. So there are still like the tactics, the technical side of it is how do we bring some of these things out, not in such a like formal way or such as a strict, stringent, like you draw it on the board and they know we're only going to do this. It's like, hey, we're going to play. And then in the middle, we're going to talk about some of this other stuff. So I don't know. I think it's always a work in progress. There's always different thoughts behind like, how do you actually get the tactics in or actually get the technique pieces in? And that's, it's fun to explore it and play with it a little bit and see where it ends up.
And I think that's true because, until I went out and experienced a session with an experienced coach, I was very traditional in my session planning, warm up, technical, SSG, and then finish the session.
Mhm.
But this one coach, I remember doing a warm up and he planned in a game of netball. And I was like, why? Like, why? What's the purpose? How do we do that? And then as I watched it and it unfolded, it was like, right, players moving in and out of position. They know when to build up, communicate, get end to end, recovery, receive, communication. There was so much in it. And that's something which I've built and planned into my practice. And as you said, people may think, right, the ball needs to be on the floor. There needs to be loads of poles out, loads of cones. I want to see the mannequins out. I want to see goals. I want to see. And some people think it has to be this rigid structure whereby it has to be what they perceive it to be because it's always been seen that way. Whereas training now is looking very different. And by incorporating various sports within one sport, it can open up a combination of so many things and build that repetition. So as you said, with that one player who's now got those 2 touches in the transition of the game because of that warm-up, that's a success within itself. And people don't really understand that process behind it. But there is a method, as they say, behind the madness which goes on.
Yeah, I'm sure that people look at me and say there's a lot of madness sometimes. They're just like, what is she doing? But then, like, the kids love it. The kids come back. They keep playing, and I think you can never make a good player that quits. So that's great if your session was super rigid and it looked the way it was supposed to and the parents liked it because it had this certain feel. But if the kid's not playing in 3 years, it doesn't matter. Like, I want to make sure that any player that I work with is still involved in the game for as long as they choose to be a part of it. Not, so if you extend the end date on a player's career, you've extended their opportunity for them to improve. So that's a little bit of it too, is that, like, especially working in the youth game and more at a community level than this super, high paced, high travel setup, success is these kids continuing to be involved. And if they're going to continue to be involved, just by showing up, they're going to get better. They're going to learn something. They're going to be more fit. They're going to be, sharper on a ball because the reps add up. But, you might have the best player in the world at 12. And if they quit at 13 or 14, they're not going to beat the kid that was 12 and on the second team that just kept playing. I think there's a lot of kind of credit to be given for just being willing to show up sometimes. We had a kid at tryouts who was super anxious, and I was like, can you just pause and, like, say you showed up? Like, there are other people that won't put themselves in this situation, that won't go try out for a new team, and you showed up. Like, start at the most basic point. You can't get better if you're not here. And, you might get really good, but if you hate it and you quit, you're not getting any better. But the kid that maybe doesn't have it be as strict, as rigid, it doesn't feel like a job, it doesn't feel like a chore, they're going to end up better in the long run just because they were able to stay involved and it was something that they were passionate about and something that they enjoyed doing. So that's how I think about it as a coach, is like, if every year I add to their soccer career is a year that they're going to get better. And that's much more, I think, impactful than just knowing I hit my 20 bullet points over the course of a season and I feel like I checked the boxes.
Absolutely, and I love that. And just in the conversation that I just had, not having to tick off those boxes can be really important, because sometimes we get lost in the coaching methodology and what's expected, and we forget about the players or forget about what we need to do, because sometimes, we might have 4 sessions and we've planned out the 4 sessions, but realistically on session 1, the players have struggled with this repetition and understanding the outcomes, and therefore we've tried to move on session 2, but therefore we're not having success from session 1 because we've tried to move on too quickly, whereas we could have sacrificed session 2 and just repeated session 1 again, and then they're picking up on those habits, they're picking up on what's expected, they're making that improvement. So therefore, by sacrificing a session, you're actually making more improvement than you would by trying to move on to another session already.
I think there's also something to be said about, like, being willing to admit it didn't work. Like, I think we've all probably had that activity at a training session where we're like, this is not what we thought. Like, we wrote it out on paper, we drew it out, we laid out all the cones, the pennies are set, the timing is there, and we play it and we're like, oh no, like, this is not what I thought it was going to be at all. So there's, like, a certain power to being a coach and like, looking at the kids, and, like, I've had a time or two where I can think of a thing that I tried and they look at me like 2-3 minutes in and I look at them and I'm like, let me make one adjustment and let's try it. And if this still, like, is not great, we'll move on. And they're like, what? And I'm like, this isn't what we thought it was going to be. Like, why are we beating our head against the wall and getting nowhere? Like, so there's also that little bit of vulnerability as a coach and admitting that, like, I'm not always right. Like, yeah, I got that one wrong. Or, like, we'll try a game and I'm like, I don't think I got that right. I think we can play it, but it's got to be, like, a different number, a different shape. So there's a little bit of that side of it. The other side is, like, youth soccer coaching. Like, I'm running 8 sessions a week. So I do get a trial and error of some of this stuff. So if I find an activity that I like,
I might try it with the 12s and the 17s and the 19s and see where it fits. Okay, well, it was too big of a space for the 12s, a perfect space for the 17s. The 19s needed a little bit more space. How do I change the timing of it based on the age group? So, like, there's a benefit to some of that. Like, I coached collegiately for about a year and a half or so, and you don't have a lot of time to try things because you're so structured and you're so regimented, and, you know, you have 3 training sessions, then a game, and then it's this and it's that. So you don't have a lot of time as a coach to really, like, explore how to tweak things. But I would take, like, our academy director at our club has an incredible curriculum written out for kids kind of 12 and under, with set sessions, set activities, timing, different pieces, different categories, and it's in this master Excel spreadsheet that I can just go click on and open up a session and see what he's thinking. So now I've started to try and take the pieces that he's built in for 9, 10, 11, 12, and can I change it? Sometimes I change it and it's great and it works well. Sometimes I do it and I'm like, this is a game that needs to stay with 9-year-olds. So there's definitely that piece of, like, the benefit of youth soccer of getting to run a lot of sessions. And then there's also that piece where, like, sometimes it just doesn't work. And you got to be okay enough to say, yeah, my bad. Hold on. You guys grab a drink. Let me start this over because we're not getting where we want to. And that's, I think, as a coach, something that is tough. Like, you don't want to be the one that's wrong. But, like, you expect your players to try things and they're going to mess up. So if you can't do that as a coach, like, you know, model that behavior for them. Yeah, this was not good. Let's pause. Just like, you know, and they're like, oh, I can't believe you messed up. And I'm like, dude, I just watched you hit a shot out of bounds for a throw in. Like, it's fine. We're all making mistakes today. It's okay. We're going to pause. Let's reset this. And then let's see what comes next.
I love that, and modelling that behaviour, or they're making those mistakes, because I think that's such a key point and a key quote which I'm going to have you on. You know, if we're expecting players to make those mistakes and to be there learning, then we're there learning and going to have to make those mistakes as well, because you only learn by becoming a better coach by that trial and error. What works for us, what doesn't? How do we like to coach? How do we have certain types of delivery? How do we work with certain coaches? Is an assistant coach for us? Is a head coach for us? And that's part of life, and you know, I think that improves us as coaches over that period of time. And by being thrown in that deep end, that's something which I'm completely big on, because unless we're really finding it and we want it refined, we want it just very structured, we follow a very straightforward path and linear path, you know, realistically, we're not growing, we're not flourishing, we're just going to follow step by step, and then it's very mundane rather than experiencing and enjoying.
Yeah, and I think you have to have, like, a core of things that you come back to. So there are, like, 4 or 5 activities off the top of my head that no matter what age group I'm with, I know I can run X, Y, and Z pieces, and I'm going to feel good about the adjustments that I need to make based on the age. But every once in a while, it's like, you can't just run the same 5 activities. Like, you can always bring out a new coaching point. You can always say, well, we're doing the same game again, but we're going to look at it from the defensive side or from the transition point, or now we're looking at it when your number's down or number's up. But every once in a while, just, like, trying something new to make them think about it differently, it can be really impactful too. Just because if you're playing the same game the same way all the time, whether you change the coaching points or not, there's a level of, like, complacency from the player. But when you give them that new activity, and we're probably going to try it over the course of a week. So the first day, we're just going to try it and see, does it work? Like, logistically, does this make sense? Okay, the timing was off, or the space was off, or, like, how do I adjust it? And then the second day, it's like, how do I put coaching points into it? And then by the third day, it's like, okay, now we're really going to compete at it. Like, you know the game. We've discussed the rules. These are the key things we're looking for. Can you now do it? But it's got to be over the course of a week, which, again, like, you don't always get in every environment that you're in. So, like, for me, it's a really cool kind of, like, coaching playground in that regard. And if the first day is awful and we got to change it, then, yeah, we move on. But, like, if I can take an activity or a topic and, like, blend it over 2 or 3 days, by the time we hit that second or third day, I feel like that's where you get it. So it's that balance of, like, everything can't be new all the time, because then they're just learning activities. They're not learning soccer stuff. But then everything can't always be the same, because then they're just like, oh my gosh, we're doing the same new one again. You know, so it's fun. It's a nice little way to explore. And, you know, I'll see an activity somebody else does and, like, hey, can I run it? And there's some that I'm like, nope, not for me. I don't know how to explain that the right way right now. And then there's others where I'm like, ooh, I like that. Let's add this in. But I think it's probably a, like, 1, 2, 3 training session thing before I decide, like, okay, yeah, this is a game I would come back to, or nah, maybe this one isn't for how I coach or how I've laid it out. I'm missing something, you know, and it's not the right
thing for right now type of thing.
And I think that's true because sometimes, whilst I was on my UEFA B, there was a session which they'd done and it was part of the content. I was like, this isn't for me. This isn't something which I've taken into my practice. And I tried to do it once and I was just like, you know what? I just don't really understand what's going on here. So it's not for me. And a couple of times since I've tried to do it, I was like, it is just not for me. And sometimes you have to work that out. And it's completely fine to say that's not for me or I'm not comfortable doing that because, we're not going to excel at every point. And therefore, that's why you get, assistant coaches who don't become head coaches because it's not for them or it doesn't work, and finding that level or finding what works is absolutely perfect. So I think it's great what you're doing. I think the approach that you have is perfect because a lot of coaches that come through think, right, I have to do this, I have to achieve that, I have to go there. These are the sessions that Pep Guardiola and so on puts on, so I have to repeat them and I have to do them. No, you don't, because you don't become the next Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho, Emma Hayes, etc. without doing your own type of content.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's so many great resources. There's almost a point in time where you have to stop looking at them all. You're like, well, that session looks good, and that session looks good, and that session looks good, and it's like, just pick one activity. The next time you see a session that you like, pick one activity. Can you add that into something that you already know? So can you bookend it like, hey, I really like this warm up. I'm going to try this activity that I like in the middle. And then at the end, I'm going to do something that I know as well. So that way, if the new activity works great, then perfect. It holds its place in the middle and we keep going. If I don't really like it, then we're going to move through it into something that I know I like, or does it actually fit? So if our sessions normally look a certain way, but me trying to force this idea in because I saw it on YouTube and it looked cool, if it doesn't fit within the structure of how we do our session anyways, why? So there are pieces where I'm like, okay, that makes sense. This for me would fit kind of in our session plan here. So I'm going to try it in this space. But if it's not I think it's really tough to take a brand new session, from somebody and just start to finish, run somebody else's stuff. But I think starting with one activity and seeing, okay, this piece fits here or that piece fits there. And again, I think, own up to the fact that you're going to mess up sometime and that's okay too. And that's part of learning, and then you own up to it and you tell the kids, not the best. I don't think that one fit for us. And there have been times where I've told parents I don't think that training session was very good today. And that's on me. There has to be some ownership to it. If you want people to tell you great job at the end, you got to be willing to tell them when it wasn't great too. And have that balance to it. And they're not always going to like you for it, but I'd much rather tell a parent hey, I don't think we were very good today. And I can definitely take some of the blame. I don't think that activity set us up for success. But then on the flip side, I'm like, they were really good today. That one was great. So you got to be kind to yourself in that too. You can't just always look for holes to pick because there are a million of them that you can constantly do. But having those days where you come off the field and you're like, no, that was a good one. I like that one. Have those moments of self-pride and self-confidence building too, where you run a session that you feel great about and you're excited about it too.
And I think that's great, that ownership and the way you speak, speaking to parents, because sometimes we can hide away from speaking to parents and they can end up becoming our enemies because we're not communicating with them and then they just find that frustration and then, we create that divide naturally by not doing so. So it is difficult to own up the things. It is difficult to take that accountability and to say, I messed up or that doesn't work or X, Y, and Z. And especially to approach parents about it, especially if they're paying or they got this expectation that they're bringing their kid to you to improve and so on. But by doing it creates that two-way relationship. Right, I'm going to get things wrong, but we're learning, and then it creates that right environment, that right group, because then those who want to go off and find the perfected coach, allow them to crack on, and then sometimes if they want to move away, it just refines your group to those who want to learn, be together and be collective. And I think also there as well that fits in perfectly with identity, because as you also said, if you're looking at so many sessions, you've got to switch off at one point. But if you're blending so many different sessions and taking bits from say like Ajax or what Dortmund are doing or what they're doing in Germany, Spain and so on, then it's great that you're building a combination of things, but then you're losing a sense of identity because you're chopping, changing and bringing so much in. You're not really building on terms of what you want to do and what you want to bring, and therefore you're lacking identity. So people look at you, look at your group, look at your session, look at your club and so on. They're like, I don't really understand what this club is about or what it stands for, and it's too much of a chop and change in terms of how that looks then.
Yeah, agreed. And I think there are pieces of it that even if you don't, you're not guiding pressing, or you're not trying to sit in a low block, or you're not trying to be super possession oriented, there are ways that you can take some of those ideas and then just make sure they fit. So maybe the structure of the activity is the same, but the points that you make within it are going to change. So, hey, I love this, but it's super possession based, and I have 12-year-olds. So we may not be great at it, but it does a really good job of creating a space for them to play in. So every coaching point I make is going to be about using these spaces well, because I like this part of it. So again, I think it's like trial by fire a little bit, where you have to kind of have an idea of what are the points you're going to make in it. And there are some days that I think I do a great job of like, not only do I have the session written out, but I've scribbled some like, these are key phrases, key words, key points that I want to make within that, so that I don't get overwhelmed and start trying to fix a million things when we're not going to fix a million things. And then there are other days where I like get in and I start working on it and I'm like, what was the point here? Like, where was I trying to go with this? And can I be better about like the specificity of what we're actually aiming for within it? So I think, I mean, by all means, take activities from anywhere and everywhere, but make sure that the points that you're making make sense to what you've already talked about. So if we've talked about being patient defenders and staying combined and compact, and now I'm playing a game that's just about you high pressing, like it doesn't make sense. So, you know, maybe we play the same game, but we change how you win the ball back. You know, there are different tweaks that you can make to great things to kind of make them fit you and yours, and you just got to play with it a little bit to figure it out sometimes.
Absolutely, and I think that relates again as we're continuously learning through that journey and we're reflecting, and you know, there's so much detail which goes into it. We look at sessions, we get feedback from players and parents and so on, and sometimes we can have that downtime or that time away from the pitch, and we can spend time reflecting. And reflection is good, but as you said, if you pick up at too many holes, then it leads to overthinking. It leads to, you know, that lack of confidence. Then you start to judge yourself. Then you're like, right, I don't want to put that session on again. Then it can take away from you. So, you know, just having that balanced mind and just being able to go, right, I want to pick out, say, 3 or 4 reflection points, and then I'm going to pick out no more, can be a really good point to go, right, that's going to stop me from overthinking and overanalyzing. And I know I remember dating a girl once in high school, and all she did was criticize me. Well, she not only did, but she criticized me by going, you just overthink and overanalyze every point. I'm like, that's just the way my mind is wired. And as I've become older, I've tried to learn more and more how to stop taking out that simulation of every point, and try to stop and go, right, this is what it is, this is how it looks, this is how it could improve, what did I enjoy and what could I enjoy, for example. And it's just about finding that right stepping stone and process for you which works. So I think that's an important point as well, not to pick too many holes in your sessions and so many types, because for you're an amazing coach who's delivered over 200 sessions this year, as you said, which is a huge accolade. But imagine if you picked holes apart in every reflection or every session you've done. You'd be, you know, the biggest overthinker in the world.
Yeah, and I think it is a balance. So there are days where I probably should be more self-critical and I'm not, and there are days where I probably like am way too critical. So I think it's all about balance in all of it, whether it's like how you deal with the players, how you deal with yourself, how you deal with the logistics behind the scenes. Like there is a certain point where like you get to it and you just sit down and you're like, I'm just going to let it be what it is, and know that like the impact that I make is going to be seen in small ways. And there isn't always an aha moment. Like I think every coach is waiting for like that one rep where you're like, that was it, that was perfect, that was the one. They don't always come because you're not in control of that. And like, you might have a bad day from one of your better players, and what should be really good, every time this kid receives the ball, it just bounces off of their shin for some reason that you never see. This kid has an incredible touch, and this day you're trying to do something that requires their touch, and they don't have it. So that it's just, you know, it is what it is a little bit, and not in a complacent sort of way, but in that like recognition of there are only so many things you can control, and when you try and control all of them, you end up controlling nothing. So what are things that I know on a daily basis within that session, within that group of players, that I can make an impact with? And some days it's a bigger impact than others, and that's okay too. It's not always picture perfect. It's not always the film session that you're turning in for a coaching license. You know, it's not real life. The people aren't putting their bad sessions on the internet. They're putting their perfect session, the perfect rep. You know, there are people that do a good job of showing some balance, and they'll show when the person misses and this and that or the other, but it's a reason they'll call it highlight films and not just films. So, you know, be kind to yourself in that if you put your session together, you probably make a highlight film out of it, but the other people aren't seeing the other 80% that wasn't perfect, and that's real life.
And I think I saw something on Twitter about that last night, about someone sharing, all this content on YouTube, for example, it being the perfect content and not actually seeing those mistakes. And part of what I want to do on my YouTube channel and part of the podcast is actually start to film some full-on sessions and how that may look. And it's only the other day I was sat thinking about it. I was like, right, what if one coach criticizes this or goes, you could do that better and do this? And it's only until I saw that post last night, I'm like, well, that's the part of the coaching process. Whereas someone might highlight that, I'd go, oh, do you know what? I actually missed that, or I actually didn't do that for a reason, or this is how my session looks and I don't want it to look that way. And I think it's just going to be part of that journey. And whether people like it, take bits away, I'm going to be happy. If people don't like it, then go and find another YouTube channel, because we're all going to deliver sessions. We're all going to criticize in some way. And, we're never going to get that pitch perfect 100% session at any point. And I believe that with any coach.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to pick holes. Criticizing people is very easy. Looking at something and saying like, can't believe they didn't do this. Like, that's easy. I think again, like it's a credit to the coach for showing up too. So if you're gonna put your sessions on the internet, like, props to you, dude. Like, that is just as valuable as the kids showing up when they're nervous about being on a new team. Like, exposing yourself to people giving you feedback that isn't necessarily stellar is valuable. And that's like, so I'm getting ready to start the AU license through the US soccer coaches stuff. And with all of that, I know that I'm gonna have to put stuff out there that I'm not always gonna feel great about. And you kind of have to be willing to open yourself up to some of that criticism, and then understand that, like, they're not criticizing you as a human. They're criticizing 30 minutes of a session that they saw you run one time that you filmed. So like having that bit of a, like, I don't know, that like rubber armor where it bounces off, as opposed to like taking everything personally. Like, you not liking my session or thinking that I can set it up differently isn't an indictment on who I am as a coach or a person. It's that activity that you thought could be ran different. And that's okay too. I think, everybody's a really good analyst after the fact. It's the person that's in the moment doing it that has to make those calls without the, hindsight version where I can sit down and pause and rewind. Like, those are the tougher calls to make. Anybody can sit down and replay something 10 times and tell you how they think it might work out after they've seen it, but it's not how life works. You don't get to record. You don't get to delete the video and start over in the middle of the game. That's the game you're playing, so you got to deal with it.
I love that, and I think that applies to a player as well, because they're in a moment, they're trying to make those decisions. So around them, they got the coach giving them the instructions, they're trying to remember what they've done, they're remembering their role. Then they maybe got a parent in the stand going on at them, then they got the players around them, then they're trying to react to the opposition players, and then they got the ball at their feet. And there's so much going on within a split second, and it's like, the coach said this, then my dad or mum said this, for example, and then, typically the dad might criticise them after the game going, right, you should have done that, you should have done this. But the importance is they're in that moment and they're only doing what they thought that they could do in that moment. And obviously if they have 5 more minutes, or, that 5 minutes where they could just freeze time and go, right, these are all my scenarios, and if I can recreate them and just keep going back and start until I find the right one, then that would be perfect. But we don't have that in terms of that sense. And living in the moment and doing what happens in the moment, just got to live with it.
Yeah. I think there's a lot, especially with like young goalkeepers, make a decision. Like, that's my biggest thing. I know you're going to get it wrong. That's okay. And I know that we're going to say that it's worse when you get it wrong because of the impact of the role that you have and the position that you play. But if you don't make any decision, I can't help you improve what decision you make next. And that's like, I think goalkeeping specifically, just because it is a job where they feel a lot of pressure, but across any age group and any kid, like, just make a choice. And if you make the wrong one, then we talk about it. And if you make the right one, then let's celebrate it. But like, no one's going to get it right 100% of the time. Like, it's so rare that any player ever at any level completes 100% of their passes, makes 100% of their shots, wins 100% of their challenges. But you have to be willing to go into the challenge. You have to be willing to try and make the pass, because the one that you do pull off is going to be great. You have to be willing to try and take that player on 1v1 and try that move. So there's that little bit of grace for them, I think, especially to understand that, like, sometimes putting something out there, even when it's not perfect, is the first step to you getting to where you want to go. Because if you never try it, I can't help you get any better if I don't know how you do things. So it's, again, that little bit of kindness and grace to yourself, and that hopefully, kind of bring you back to where we started. Like, have you created an environment where they feel okay to try it? And that's, I think, a big part for me.
And I love that, and it's great to support those players in terms of that decision making process, and what works, let's look at it again and review it, and then what if it does work, then let's celebrate it. And I think that's just a real simple 5-second message, which is so powerful, because some players are like too heavy to criticize themselves or reflect quickly, and again back to those 100 holes. Whereas we're not always celebrating all the success that they should have or could have, and realistically, right, you made 60 passes in that game and you completed 56. That's an incredible amount, so let's celebrate that. Okay, you didn't score any goals, or all 10 of your shots are off target, but you've had 56 out of 60 passes. That's incredible. So let's look at, right, maybe reducing the shots or getting in a better position. And there's a lot of opportunity to sort of build off the success. So we're too quick to criticise and overanalyse at times, but we need to celebrate the success a lot more in terms of, how the game can look at times.
Oh yeah, little victories. Like everybody has that one big shining moment where you want to say, like, this is where it changed. This was the big turning point moment. I scored the big goal and my life changed. It's a series of tiny things that make you better. It's the 6 extra reps that you got because you were joking around with your friend shooting at the end of a training session. It's the, you offered to hop in another person's session and get some extra touches, or it's you messing around with the ball in the backyard. Like, it's the little bits that add up to something bigger. It's very rare that you see like these massive jumps where like this kid can't walk and chew gum and the next thing you know they're doing a rainbow over a kid. No, this kid had to learn how to do every step along the way, and celebrate some of the little steps as you go too. Like, those are just as impactful, because when you hear like, hey, that was the right pass. Like, that pass we've been talking about? Or you're trying to play it here and it just hasn't quite worked, like, that was the one. And then you see they're like, ooh, okay, that was one. It's like, okay, if you've done it once, can you do it a second time? And now you're doing that piece consistently. So, okay, now this pass is working. So because you've created this opportunity to pass and you now are connecting those passes, the defender's dropped off, so now we got to work on your dribbling. And now when you beat that player off the dribble, so I think it is like tiny details, tiny moments with players too. Like, it's easy to pick out big, happy, shining moments, but I think there's a like, I don't know, I guess like a special type of joy when I can find that little moment to point out to a kid where I'm like, hey, you saw that, right? Like, you recognize that, right? That was what made that work. Like, I think as a coach, I try to make sure that if we score a goal, I want the first kid that connected the pass to know, hey, we don't get there unless you do that. We don't get there unless you press and force that turnover. We don't get there unless you challenge on that 50-50 ball, or you're unselfish and you connect that next pass. Like, that matters too. We're going to celebrate the person that scored 100% and the high fives and all of that. But if you don't pause to recognize the little pieces of it, I think you lose something there, and you lose extra opportunities for joy. And why would you ever want to give those up?
And this is true. You don't want to give those up. You want those moments. You want to celebrate it. You want to make sure that they're aware of that recognition, which is really important, because sometimes, you might have a player in a team and, they're not the top goal scorer, or they're not the goalkeeper who's kept, all the saves, or they're not the player who's provided the most assists, but they're the player who's been involved in all the build-up all year long, or they're the player who's had the most recoveries, or they're the player who's made the most trainings and given that commitment. And recognising that player for that is absolutely essential. And I know we're coming up to our end of season presentation, and the club I'm at now, they have 3 set awards for our seniors. So it's top goal scorer, coach's player, and player's player, and 2 of those 3 awards have been won by the same player, and the top goal scorer is by natural top goal scorer. But we've had one player in our team who can play across the senior teams, and there's 3 of them, so he's got all of those and the 19s available, so he's got 4 teams he can play across, and he ended up playing a total of something like 54 or 56 games last season, and that is an incredible amount for a 16-year-old, but there is going to be no recognition for him at the end of the year formally. Now, I know all the other boys are like, wow, look at the commitment, look at that, and the data's there, and he'll be proud of it, and his family will, and it is quite seen across the club that he gives that commitment. But for me, he's like, why isn't he doesn't need an award, but it would be nice to have one for him, because that is an incredible amount of time to commit just to games.
Yeah, no, and I think there are so many ways that you can celebrate kids informally, and ways that you can continue to just remind players, like, they notice when you compliment somebody else. Like, just like they notice when you criticize somebody else, they notice when you compliment them. So it helps, I think, some of those players that maybe don't get those like trophies or plaques or certificates to hang on the wall, knowing that you see them, now their teammate sees it too. So it has to be something done in a way where the other people recognize it. So it's not a quiet celebration on the side. Like,
if you made the ball that got us in behind, I'm waiting till the cheering dies down and we're back, and you hear that kind of lull as the kickoff gets ready to start, and then I'm like, hey, so and so, that comes from your pass. Like, we don't get there unless it's that. So it's intentional with the timing of it too, because I want the parents to hear it too. I don't want the parent to say, well, so and so scored 3 goals today, they're the best player, and I'm like, so and so tapped 3 balls in because this other kid dribbled 4 kids and put a ball on the doorstep. Like, we got to give credit where credit is due, and then calling them out in front of their teammates too in those good moments. Like, it's really easy to say, like, oh my gosh, so-and-so, you messed up again. And kids hear that all the time. But, like, the power of stopping a rep for a positive moment is crazy. Like, it's something that I've seen done before, and something that I talked to another coach about a couple of weeks ago was like, I want to be more intentional about stopping on the good ones. Like, it's easy to stop on the bad ones. Hey, we've messed up 3 times in a row. How do we fix it? But how often do we stop it and say, whew, those last 3 were stellar. Can we, let's replay this again so that we remember this, because now we've seen it. Like, that was the goal. That touch, that's the one we want to focus on. So I'm going to pause to make sure that we recognize it. And that I think it's definitely something that I want to be better at and continue to be cognizant of, is giving into those little moments and, like, really putting the spotlight on them for those tiny wins and those tiny successes when, not everybody always gets a trophy, but those words are very, very impactful. And then when you see teammates doing it, you're like, okay, this is really cool. Like, that's what you want to get to, is when the player starts recognizing, like, they score and the first thing they do is like, that pass, yes, I loved it. And that's the chills moment where you're like, okay, they get it. Like, that's a different level.
And I agree, and that's huge. And when you stood on the side as a coach and you've got players who might be on the bench with you and sat there, and I can think of one player now who stands out in my mind and making one huge tackle at under 11s, and it was the most incredible Paolo Maldini tackle, and that's what we called him, Maldini, because he would just be spot time perfect, and it was an incredible tackle, and all the boys going, yeah, and it just created an amazing sense of hype and environment, and it really lifted everyone up, and it was fantastic, and that moment lives with me because of how powerful it was. So imagine being that 11-year-old on the pitch, you created this perfect pass tackle, and then all the boys are going, yeah. And honestly, what a moment it must have been for him. And I remember, it still lives with me, but what an impact, as you say, that it does have. And those surreal moments when it's going from coach to players doing that, and that's where the moments are made.
Absolutely. That's like the player driven piece of it. Like, I am happy to meet you where you want to be as a team, but at the end of the day, like, I'm not scoring any goals, guys. Like, I'm out of shape. I'm not helping. I'm not pressing. I'm not tracking back on defense. I can give you some help on suggestions, but, like, you gotta do the hard work. Like, you're putting the miles in. You're the legs that are sore after. You're the one that got kicked by, taking that extra touch that we need you to get around that player. So if they're the ones that are, doing that side of it, they need to be the ones that are receiving the praise for it. It's not me. Those kids made those decisions. I didn't make it for them. I may have helped guide them there. I may have put them in a position where hopefully they felt comfortable, or a role within the team where they felt confident in what they were being asked to do. But, like, it's got to go back to them. And you want it to be up and down the sideline. You want to have, like, the most annoying teammates of all time that just scream and celebrate and choose to, like, support you. Like, that's one of the coolest things for a team. The college team that I worked at is, like, renowned for having the most annoying bench, because they will scream for their teammates for 90 minutes, like, to the point where the other team is like, do they ever shut up? And I'm like, no, they don't. Like, the first 2 games I coached with them, I had to walk away because they were so loud as a bench. Every tackle, every 50-50 ball, just, like, constant, just pride and praise for those people that are putting in the work on the field. That it's like, it's such a cool environment to be a part of, where the recognition of the little wins, of the details that we need to actually get to some of those big picture tactical moments. Like, it's huge, and it's so cool when it's driven by the players and not just the coach or not just a parent on the sideline. Like, that's the goal, with every team.
And even for yourself, we talked about players having those moments, but even if you were to go into marketing and say that's where you specialise, stay in 10 years, just even looking back on those moments and going, do you know what, I actually was part of that, I enjoyed that, and what I created for that, that's a great takeaway for you, and just a lot more than going, all right, we had that tactical, we broke the line, we went through and scored. You're like, oh, remember those moments, remember when they had that strong tackle, remember when he prevented that other player going through, or she, and that's what football's all about, is those moments and getting to that.
Mm-hmm.
then you gotta have fun with it too. So like if you want to be someone that wants to joke around with the players because this kid that normally is great just completely whiffed on a ball that came to him and fell over, you can't have a laugh with them about that if you can't recognize the other pieces too. So like, oh, the kid that'll come out and she's like, that was awful. I'm like, yeah, you're right, it was. We all watched that, not your best. But it's because every other thing that I say is honest on the flip side. So you can have those little moments of like, yeah, man, that was not the one. We all watched you miss that sitter in front of the goal. Somehow you kicked it over the goal from 2 yards away. We don't know how. But it's also the other side of it is like, yo, I'm going to give you credit for the tackle that you made, and I'm going to give you credit for this and that. So you get a little bit of leeway to have that bit of honesty and rapport when you don't just recognize the easy moments, you recognize the tough moments. So, you know, again, I think you get to have, it's fun sometimes, and we get to laugh at one another at like, you know, oof, that one, we all remember the one that you did and it was not great, but then we're also going to, you know, be your biggest hype man for the ones that you did. So it's cool to see both sides of that too. And when they can learn to laugh at their mistakes and it's not something that they're ashamed of and they feel like they have to hide, or they feel like now I've got to do something good or they're going to call me out, like that like psychological safety point of it comes back to it. Like, yeah, we're going to laugh at you when you do something dumb because it was dumb and we can all admit it. But we're also like going to put our arms around you when it sucks, and we're going to be there for you when you had a hard day, and we're going to celebrate the good times. So it gives you more freedom to kind of experience the range of emotions with them when you stay in on that piece of it.
And that's what it's about, creating that environment where they're comfortable to make mistakes and, you know, not hide away from it, because that's what training's about, and you're there to make mistakes. And, you know, we're going to make mistakes in game, but if you do it in training, then we're there to support you as one another. And that's why the whole point of training is in place, and the whole point of learning, because sometimes, you know, players and parents and coaches have this expectation, perfect training, perfect game, and it's like, well, no, they need to be making mistakes here and now, because unless they don't, then how are they ever going to learn from it? And or if they do it in a game, they're going to get hammered for it in a game. So whilst we do it in training and the parents, you know, sat in the car or they've dropped them off, let's do it here where there's less pressure, and I don't mind if you do it in the game, because that just means that we're going to continue to build on that resilience and how we overcome it. So creating that environment is massive importance.
Yeah, there's a sense of humor to it too. Like, you know, we've all had that one time where we go to hit a ball and we like trip over it, or you're not paying attention and this kid like megs you while you're trying to talk to somebody else, and like if you can't laugh off some of the little things, like, what are we doing? I'm coaching 12-year-olds. How am I mad at a kid because she tried to meg me while I was talking to another kid? Like, I don't like it, but I'm going to laugh with you about it. Like, it's got to be a little bit of both, like, to understand that, like, yeah, we can have a little bit of humor and a little bit of brevity in it. Like, we don't always have to take something so seriously. This is not life and death. It is a game, you know, and giving, you know, just that leeway to be themselves. And it comes with a little bit of fun and a little bit of joking on the side. And, you know, it's a nice balance for me. You get to be human. You don't have to be a perfect model of soccer perfection all the time, because that's pretty unrealistic for just about everybody.
Of course, and you know, it's great in terms of what you're doing and how you support those players, and you know, it's great what you're doing as a coach. So your current role, you're not a head coach, are you?
I was the head coach of 3 different teams throughout our club. So I had this 18 girls, the 17 girls, 16 girls, and the 12s. Then I also hopped in with the 15s in the spring. So I was the head coach on those 4. And then I helped out with our 19s and GA and some of the other teams. So I got a little bit of both, where I help out sometimes and I'm kind of that second person down the line. And then there's times where it's like my team, my sessions, my plan, let's go.
Right. So you get that perfect balance in that sense. So obviously when you're leading it and then assisting it, it's obviously 2 different roles in that. Do you like, you know, the sense of being able to go into a session without the pressure of having to be the head coach and manage and just going in and having that people element factor, or is it you like having the overall by being a head coach?
I'm probably a little bit too much of a control freak to always be the person that sits in second in command. There's days where it's very nice. So if I came off a long weekend where I had, you know, 3 games in 4 days or whatever it is, you know, we had a tournament and I was helping with coaching my team, hopped in with another team, coached my other team. And like, I've coached 7 games in 36 hours. Yeah, I'll sign up for an assistant coaching spot on the next one, please. Like, let me just sit there and enjoy the kids and enjoy the game. So, you know, it's nice to have a little bit of both. There are times where, like, it's tough as the assistant too, especially in youth soccer where everything is so fast paced and you know there's this training session and that training session and you're moving field and you're setting stuff and you're tearing this down. Well, like you feel like you don't know the whole picture, so it's hard to be as impactful. So like when it's my team and my players that I work with more regularly, I have a better grasp on like the end product that I'm looking for. But so if you're hopping in as that assistant coach and you haven't seen this team a ton, or you haven't seen how they train, or the points that the head coach has been trying to bring out, there are pieces that I feel like sometimes I'm missing. So I'm like, yeah, I could tell you where to make this run, but I don't know if that's something you talked about last week. So am I really helping you, or am I just like adding information that doesn't make sense right now? So it's tough in both roles. You know, there are days where there's a lot of pressure being the head coach, and then there are days where like even as an assistant, I probably overthink it a little bit in terms of like, what do they really want to do tactically here? Like a 4-3-3 looks different depending on who's playing it and what they've told the players. So if they're like, yeah, do like some crossing and finishing stuff, and I'm like, well, who's crossing the ball? Like, are your outside backs overlapping? Are your wide players getting wide? Who's finishing the ball? What runs do you want into the box? Like, there's a lot of other pieces to it that sometimes you don't have control over. You're like, okay, what do I really do with this as an assistant? So I don't know. One or the other, I think is fine, but probably my own need to be in control a little bit would make it difficult for me to only be the assistant.
I love that point, because that's something that I've tried to exert from some of the people that I've had on, and they're very good at answering this question in other ways, because what you've said there is the exact same answer that I would give, and that's one of the reasons I asked that question, because I know I would absolutely struggle to not be the head coach, the manager, etc. And only unless the right opportunity came along to be an assistant where I could learn so much, it'd have to be the right move. But for me, I sometimes when I've delegated the session to my assistant manager and he's delivered the session, and I'm standing back going, oh, I really want to get in and do this, and I want to change this, and the players should be doing this, and it's difficult then, because I don't want to take the session away from him. I don't want to step on, and I said he could have the session, and I'm glad he's delivering, and I wanted him to, but that's just me going, right, this is what I would do. But I don't say anything, because I'm happy for him to do that, and it's not my place to go, right, you should have done that, you should have done this, as we spoke about earlier. But just for me standing there going, oh, I really want to do this, I know that I would struggle not to be in that lead position.
Yeah. And I think you make a good point as well. Like the person that you're working alongside changes that totally. Like there are people that I've worked with more in an assistant coaching capacity, and there is a level of like trust and explanation and understanding where it's like, yeah, I feel like I have a role. I feel like I still am making an impact. I feel like I understand what the game plan is. And then there's other people where like, you're the assistant coach, so you're supposed to do the stuff they don't want to. And you're like, oh, okay, this isn't really an assistant coach. This is me being like your personal assistant. So like the situation that you're in changes it a lot. You know, who you're working under, who you're working alongside. I think like some of the best coaches that I've worked with, whether it's like a head coach, assistant coach, or like a director of coaching, and then just like coaching underneath, or a technical director, are the ones that like empower you to have an opinion and aren't afraid of you wanting to do something different. So they're open to new ideas. They want you to come in with something different. They're gonna push you on it. Like they want to know why. Like if you're gonna tell me I gotta change something, why are we doing it? But they're also not afraid to have somebody else be more knowledgeable in a specific area. Like we're not all gonna know everything about everything. So if you and your head coach have different strengths and like knowledge bases, it's great. But when you guys both know the same thing about the same stuff, it's like, what are you really doing? Like you have to have that balance, whether you're the head coach or the assistant, where I trust that you know X, Y, and Z, and I am gonna talk to you about it to make sure we're on the same page. But like that is your world, that is your area. And then, you know, you want that as an assistant coach too, the trust to be put in you, so that eventually if you're like, yeah, no, I'm over being an assistant, how do I do what's next? You feel empowered to make some of those big calls and step into the big moments, and not just, you know, watch somebody else always make that final decision.
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons where me and my assistant manager now, we work so perfectly hand in hand, because a couple of years ago they asked me to come in, step in and do some sessions with them, and the whole point was for me to come on board, but I just couldn't marry up the time with the other time I had with my club at the time, so I was able to develop those relationships and that relationship with him, and I came back last year, and he was happy to stand straight down from head coach to assistant and go, right, you can be head coach, and that's because he knew that he was happy to be the assistant. He knew what he could bring. He he was happy to pass over and allow me to do that knowledge side. And, you know, I'm no Jose Mourinho, Pep Guardiola in that sense, but he was happy for me to lead on the squads and training, and then he could support. And it worked absolutely perfect for us, and I'm glad we have that relationship. Now, this year where I managed the 19s and we got 16s coming up, they're bringing 2 of their coaching staff with them, and one of them is the manager, and it's going to be difficult because I've not coached alongside him before. It's his squad essentially coming into mine. He's a head coach to one of the senior teams, and it's going to be right. What are your expectations? Are you going to end up stepping up because you're used to being a head coach? So it's going to be a time of understanding over the next few weeks as we get back, but it's also then understanding, right, how can we make this work for each other, because we don't want to step on each other's toes. I don't want to prevent you from bringing what you want to bring, and I don't want you preventing me from how I typically coach or manage my squad, but I'm happy to learn or happy to implement things. And it's just about having that combination between each other as a coaching staff, which really works for the best of the team.
Yeah, 100%. It's all about, I think, a little bit of selflessness at times, and saying, like, I think I know how I want to do this, but this person has an idea, like, let's roll with it. And again, just like, you know, your session might work, their session might work, their session might not work, but then also meeting those moments where things don't work with a level of grace and understanding. So you can't go into it saying, okay, well, I let my assistant coach run this, or my head coach is running this, and all I'm doing is sitting here picking holes in it. Like, I've got to be on the same page with them. Like, what are our success points and what are we looking at? And then if it doesn't work, it's got to be something where that relationship allows you to be vulnerable enough to say, where do I get better? And I think it's a tough thing to do. I know I personally still don't love it when someone's like, you know, you could have done that better. I'm like, I know, you don't need to tell me, which isn't a great reaction for me either. Like, I need to have that openness to say, okay, how? Like, let's get to the bottom of this. And if it's just them being, you know, your cones were different colors and it would have made more sense if they were all the same, then it's like, okay, no, I don't need that. But like, if they have specific intentional feedback about ways that the message can be improved, then let's sit and let's talk about it and be willing to be wrong, be willing to have that little bit of criticism and critique. And then, you know, don't let yourself be kind of a punching bag either. So have some pieces where you're like, no, I'm gonna stand up for this and that. I like this and that piece of it. So it's a different dynamic with everybody that you work with. And I think the best coaches that I work with are ones that are confident enough in themselves to not always feel like they have to be right. Like, they know that they're going to mess stuff up. They know that not everything is perfect, and they're going to know what they do really well and do that really well consistently. And they're probably going to be aware of some things that they don't do as well. And that's where you're going to be able to kind of blend those personalities or those strengths and skill sets to make the best overall coaching staff for the group that you're working with.
Absolutely. You know, I think that relates for the groups of players that we have as well, because, you know, you might be the head coach and say you've got 25 players and you realistically, you are the head coach to 25 individuals. And you're the one who's accountable, you're the one responsible, you're the one who disciplines them, you're the one who does everything, etc. And whilst you have that, you want to be responsible essentially for each of the 25. But you might have, say, 10 who you don't have a great relationship with. So it's easier to group them in terms of that mentoring or management of your assistant coach or your other coaching staff, and then it ends up working in terms of how you can build those bridges or complement the entire team rather than having to manage 25 individuals in that perspective.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to have balance. I also think it's a great thing to challenge yourself with that too, and say, if these are the 10 that I know I don't get along with as well, I'm taking those 10. Like, you need to take the other ones. I'm good with them, but I got to sort out where I got to find these guys. Like, where do I meet these players so that we're on the same page too? And sometimes it's just, you're different people. Like, you're just different personalities. It's like, you know, you're not going to get along. If you weren't in a situation where you were put in the same group, you probably wouldn't have been hanging out otherwise, and that's fair too. Like, you can't force it. But there's definitely that challenge piece of it. Like, okay, I don't get along with this player, or we don't see eye to eye, or we're just different in who we are, and you know, that they're more than entitled to be themselves and have their own views and thoughts and this and that and the other. But like, all right, let's be really intentional about trying to find a middle ground here too. So it's nice to have that balance. I think it's really, really nice for players when they have more than one set of eyes, more than one voice, more than one, you know, kind of voice of authority that they can come to and have that rapport with, just because, you know, different people get along with different people. But I think as a coach too, there's sometimes where you just gotta be like, okay, today I'm gonna work with a kid that I don't really like. I'm gonna be very intentional about
finding good moments in this player. And I know that I can find it in this player. I know that I can joke along with this player, but like I got to do a better job of making sure this player feels the same level of respect from me and the same level of investment from me, and not overlooking them. And it's hard because there's always, you know, that group of players you gravitate towards and you walk in and it's like, hey coach, remember this, let's talk about this. And then there's those other players that are kind of on the fringe, and yeah, they matter too. So you gotta be intentional about it. So.
And I completely agree with that, because I was sat with a young person the other day in school, and they've got a head of year essentially, and they were saying to me, all the head of year ever seems to do is work with the naughtiest kids because they take up her attention all the time. And the young person was saying, we don't feel that she gives us the time because of these kids taking it up. And I felt really sad for this child, because I was like, realistically, you are part of that wider group and you should be having a good amount of time or a good relationship with your head of year. And it's not. It's being taken away by, obviously, the naughty kids, called naughty kids in this young person's perspective. And I just felt sorry for her because she wasn't having that time when... And it's not like she's not deserving of the time. And it's like, right, why aren't you getting that time? And then it was difficult to sort of relay that back to the head of year. But it was just, it's how the young people think, which is part of this process, and the importance of what they might take away in that perspective and how we deliver and how we put things in place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the time you just have to like make them pause and actually get to it too. Like it never fails that if I compliment one kid on a pass they made, the other kid is like, well, didn't you think my pass was good? And I like will stop the whole group and I'll be like, hey, can we all pause for a second? Like, I'm complimenting this person. That doesn't mean I'm not complimenting you. Like, when your pass is good, I'm going to compliment you as well. But like, I don't have to, like, me making them shine in that moment and recognizing something doesn't like dampen your ability to shine too. So I think like that's one with players younger specifically, but I'll get it with the older kids too. And some of them are joking around. They're like, you just said her shot was really good. Does that mean my shot was bad? And I'm like, well, you know, it wasn't great. Or, you know, it's like, hey, I didn't say your shot wasn't bad. I just said theirs was good. Or like, why am I not getting in the game? Well, do you want to tell me what teammate you want to take minutes from? What? I'm like, you do realize that like every time you tell me you want to go in, you're telling me one of them has to come out. Oh. So just like getting them to have that more global view of like everything that's going on, and understanding that like they're always going to be focused on themselves as a player. I think like that would be me as a player, probably you as a player. Like I'm focused on what I need to do today and how I look good, show good, feel good, play good. That sometimes it takes those moments of just like you realize what it means for somebody else when you say that. Like, you know, I'm not talking negatively about you just because I'm talking positively about them. And I will even tell kids that. I'm like, I am going to compliment someone because of what they did, not because you did wrong. This is just something they did well. Like, this is not it. You know, we're going to make this up because so-and-so needs a break, not because so-and-so is bad. You're not being pulled out because you're bad. You're being pulled out because you look like you might pass out and it's 110. Like, there are times where they just need those, like, grounding moments to, like, pause and see, okay, my brain is spinning. They're going to make a ton of assumptions about what you say. Everything is, you know, it's good, it's bad, it's black and white. And sometimes it's just like, hey, I didn't pull you out because you're bad. I pulled you out because you're exhausted. I pulled you out because you've been really, really good for us and we have another game. Or you're coming back from an injury and it's not okay for me to push this right now. So there's some moments where like granting additional clarity or like pulling a kid aside and saying like, hey, what did you hear me say versus what I actually said? And then can I clarify that? Like if you are sitting here and you think everything I say is just ripping on you, number one, I got to reassess how I'm saying it because that's coming off horribly. But number two, how do we figure out what you're hearing versus what I'm saying and find it meet in the middle somewhere? Because I think that's the thing as a coach too, that you can say something and you didn't even realize that you said it and they took it a certain way, but they do. And you got to find those moments to like, okay, hold on. I don't think that worked out the way I thought it was. This is what I was saying. What did you hear? I heard that I was horrible and that I should stay on the sideline forever. I'm like, I just said so-and-so is playing really good. Yeah, that's not what I heard, coach. And it's like, okay, hold on. Let's make sure the message and the meaning are shared, not just I'm saying one thing with one intent and they're hearing the same words with a drastically different undertone or intention to them.
And that's a key point there within itself, because what they might hear on the pitch, what they might take away, the way they think about it can be very different to what we relayed. And I've had that this season. So in the 19s chat that I posted in, I just reflection on a game. We give reflections after every week, and I put one in, and one of the players took it out of complete context, and then their parent approached me, and the way they approached me and they started criticising, was like, whoa, you've taken this out of complete context. So when I read it back and I said, do you know what, I actually meant it this way, and you've taken out that way, we ended up finally agreeing on it. But it was just that way it can be perceived and come across. So they were trying to get across that I was blaming exactly the defence. I was like, no, we have let a lot of easy goals in as a result of the way we have defended. So if we're not stepping up collectively as a line, and they're breaking lines as opposition, or they're finding gaps, or they're beating us on the wings, that's a defensive collective of how we're doing it. So we need to shuffle across, we need to step up, we need to sit, we need to do it together, someone needs to cover. I was like, that is just a valid point. I'm not going, right, all the goals are a result of the defence. It's the way we have defended as a team. So whether the 4 defenders have been replaced by 4 midfielders next week, it is still a defensive mistake that we are making, not on the personnel that we have in there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like providing the space for people to have those conversations too, because sometimes it's just like the word of like God dictated from above by a coach, but you have to have that approachableness to like have a parent come up. So I had a kid that really, really good goalkeeper, was going to go play at a Division I school, had already committed, was set to go. I had another kid who was a solid goalkeeper, but the really good kid could also play on the field. So I'm having her play on the field. Game's going great because this kid is more than manageable in goal on this high school team. This other kid excels so much that even though she's going to be a collegiate goalkeeper, she's still one of our best 2 or 3 field players. And they caught me on a quote after a game, and I was like, it's been really great that so-and-so has been able to step in goal. I've appreciated like her being willing to step up to that task. This other player has been great on the field. The mom called me and was like, if her college coach sees this, she's going to think that she's not a better goalkeeper than that. I was like, no. That was not it at all. This was about recognizing a kid who I asked to step up so that your daughter could fill this other need that we needed on the field. This has nothing to do with your daughter's ability to play in goal. So you have to have that like understanding that what you say isn't always what people hear. And you do your best to make sure that you provided enough like caveats and context, but inevitably, you know, I could tell a kid that they're having the best day in the world, and the tone of voice that I say it in, or the fact that I like look slightly to the left when I said it, now they're assuming that I'm making a joke of it. Like you can't control how people, you know, hear what you say, but you can make sure that you provide them the opportunity to like clarify it and make sure that you're on the same page. And the hope is that when you have those conversations, both sides can say like, okay, yeah, I can see where me saying it that way could be heard this way. And then hopefully on their end, you get a little bit of buy-in as well, where it's like, you know what, I may need to take a step back and look at it from a more global perspective, which is tough to do too. So it's a tricky subject all the time. I write parent emails every week, and I probably read them 3 or 4 times just to make sure that like a single verb choice can change the entire tone unintentionally. And then you've got 6 parents that are like, she just said our girls were horrible. And then there's times where you're like, nope, I needed you to hear that. That one needed to be that way. But it's definitely a piece of coaching with like the vulnerability piece, the piece where you're okay with being wrong, and okay with having those conversations and being approachable is part of it too.
Absolutely, and that's the difficult thing sometimes when you step into coaching, because you're like, right, it's all about on the grass, about the tactics, about the games, but then it's not. It's so much. There's that communication with the players, communication with parents, how then you might market your team, how you get players in, how you recruit, how you assess, how you pick a team, how you have that rotation, how you justify decisions, and that is just, you know, not even scratching the surface of the surface, and that's just how much goes into it. And sometimes that's why coaches walk away, because they don't realise how much goes into it, or they don't want to deal with that perspective of it, or there's some of the channels. And it is hard, because then sometimes we end up doing things which takes us away from coaching and doing that, and then sometimes we're the ones who's heavily criticised, and we've got to live with it, and then we've got to go away from it, and then we're living our personal lives as a result of what may have happened during the coaching practice that we've delivered in that week, that day, for example.
Yeah, I think it's a balance. Like anyone that thinks that coaching is just the stuff you do off the field is probably missing the other like part of the iceberg. Like you just see what I do at a training session or what I do at a game. You don't see the rest of the work behind the scenes, whether it's just the logistics of making sure like we have enough players at the game. We know where the game is. It's been communicated the right way. We understand the weather that's coming up. I know that I have to get to 2 different games, so I've got another coach to cover the warm up at the start of this game. Or, there's so many little things that you can never really account for that are the other side of coaching. That someone's like, well, I love to be on the field. And I'm like, that's great. But know that, like, your job isn't always going to be on the field. Like, your job's going to be answering emails, writing out sessions, doing these other little pieces of it that if you're really investing in doing the same, like to the same level that you want to do the stuff on the field, it take a longer time than you would think. And they become a facet of the work week in a way that you probably wouldn't have envisioned from someone that just sees you, joking around on a field, playing around, little games with kids. Like, that's not the majority of my job. The majority of my job is off the field with the other pieces of it as well.
Absolutely. And so what are the values that you instill within your teams when you take them on?
I think the first thing is always, are you having fun? Like, you are your best when you're having fun. You learn the most. You're open to the most information. It's something that you enjoy. Like, just the attitude and the mindset that inherently comes from you enjoying what you're being a part of is massive. The second thing is, like, you got to be willing to try it. Like, you got to give it a go. And if it's not great, we'll talk about it. But you got to have a little bit of willingness to kind of put yourself out there and try something new, or try a skill that you don't feel comfortable with, or a skill that you're trying to improve on. And then, I don't know, at the end of the day, I think a lot of it really is like, what do the players want it to be? So it's not about me. So it's like, hey, if you're showing up and you're putting the effort in and you're enjoying it, I'm going to let you steer the ship a little bit. And, like, you're going to get a little bit of say in this. To a certain extent. It's not all about what you want all the time. But there's got to be kind of that balance. Like, you got to be willing to come to the table with your side of things as well. I think coaches talk about, well, this kid has X, Y, and Z potential. I'm going to hold him to the standard. But, like, this kid was a high jumper. I would never say the highest they could ever jump is 6 feet and put the bar at 6 feet. I put the bar at 3 feet to make sure they could clear it. And then I put it at 3 feet 2 inches, and then we'd work up to 6 feet. So, like, how do I meet you where you're at? And then we'll get to the end goal. So we're not going to run a Barcelona session when you're 12 because you're not at that level yet. So I don't know if those are values or ideals or ideology. I don't know if that really fits the bill on the question. But, like, if we're having fun, if you're willing to try, and if we're meeting you where you're at, you're going to be a better soccer player at the end of the day. And you're going to be someone that comes back to the game. And you can't improve something that you're not a part of. So if you're coming back, you're already a step ahead of the kids that walked away.
Well, I would fit them in the values, and that's something which, if you wrote them down, and as you're listening to them, I'm thinking, how would I put them? And that they are literally values which you could put across and do put across, and I completely agree that they are. So if I said to you, do you have non-negotiables, would the non-negotiables be different, or would they sort of fit into what you're saying there?
I think the non-negotiables fit within that. Because I think that's kind of the starting point. Like, even in the job hunt coming into this job, those were things that I was looking for. Like, an environment where there is going to be some leeway to kind of coach my own way and do my own thing. I'm trying to think, like, non-negotiables for me. I mean, like, at this point in time, there is, like, a job aspect of it. Like, I don't want to be undersold type of thing. I don't want to be taken for granted. I might volunteer to do X, Y, and Z, but I'm going to, hold myself to a standard and ask that people respect that. So if you're coming in and saying, hey, for $100, will you do this? It's like, I might have 5 years ago, but, like, I'm going to, own up to the work that I've put in. So, I want to be valued where I'm at. I think a massive non-negotiable is, like, a boss that understands the full picture. And I'm incredibly fortunate for the guy that I work with now. There'll be weeks where, like, our Fridays are our reset days, and I'll get a text like, hey, I'm going to send you 5 emails. You're not allowed to respond until Monday. Like, you're not allowed to do this today. Like, I have told everyone they cannot contact you. So that balance of, like, stepping away from the field, and also, like, when you're on, you're on, but knowing that when you're off, you have the leeway to, like, I went to an art festival yesterday and walked around and, like, had a 20-minute phone call with him about some stuff. And he's like, yeah, just enjoy your day, dude. Like, we're good. So, like, I think that balance and who I'm working for is probably a big non-negotiable now with what I'm looking at and what I want to be a part of and what I want to attach my name to.
And I think that's key, and I think that's great that you've had that time, and especially, by just going to an art festival, switching off from, say, soccer and football, and just seeing the world for what it is, being out the outside, and just being around people and seeing what makes you happy. And I think that's important to have that downtime, that switch off, and as you said earlier on, watching movies and so on, because we can really struggle. And like last night, Friday night, I was like, right, am I going to read a book tonight? Am I going to do this? I was like, you know what? It's actually just Friday night. I'm just going to like chill out, watch some TV, go to sleep, and just recover because it's been a heavy week. And I was like, you know what? It's actually quite a nice night. And even though I'm doing podcast calls on a Saturday evening and so on, I'm like, do you know what? I'm actually enjoying doing this side of it, and it's not like a chore or work, and it's something which I got passion for to do. And even after this call now, I'll grab some food and I'll chill out for the rest of the evening, and make the most of Sunday as well. But it's just about switching off a little bit as well, and just having that downtime and taking time for ourselves, because as we spoke about moments for players, and as they're 10 years on and want to look back, we have to enjoy living our lives as well in the moment, because suddenly we're 45, 55, 65, and then our life is at that point where it's like, oh, I'm not young no more.
Yeah, for sure. And that's definitely, I think, something I didn't do a lot early on. Like, everything was about, what can I do next? How do I get a job? How do I make this work? And I've hit a point not of complacency, but of like consistency and contentment, which are at times misunderstood or confused for one another. That like, no, I'm good about this. I know somebody's gonna call me a nerd because I want to come home and play the new Zelda game. I don't care. I'm relaxing. I did my job. I'm gonna go play Zelda, and I'm just gonna disconnect. So it's valuable to have the things that you want to do in your life, to go walk around an art festival, to go to a farmer's market, to go sit on the couch and read a new book, or binge watch the latest TV show of whatever your choice in TV is. So it's a piece of it now that I try and grant myself the leeway to just put the phone down, put the stuff away, and just like, none of this is going to be solved today. I'm going to look at it tomorrow. I'm going to walk away and kind of grant myself the freedom to just do other things.
And I think that's true. And, I've been in that situation where I was delivering like 8 sessions a week, and every night grunt session, and deliver on the weekend and so on. But then I was like, do you know what? I've actually missed out on being like 21, 22, 23. And I was like, I can't even remember those years, because I was just coaching, working. And now I'm at a point where I'm like not doing so much coaching, and I'm happy with the amount that I'm doing. And I've got a good job in teaching, which I'm enjoying. And I got that downtime in half terms just to relax, breathe, and then maybe catch up on that TV series, or to read that book, or an evening in the week just to chill out. And at times previously I felt guilty for it, but I'm at a point now where I'm like, do you know what, if my mate rings me because he's got his own coaching company, he's like, do you want to coach tonight? I'm like, no, not really. I've worked all day. It's nice just to have the night off. Been there, done that, and it's nice just to build up and get to that position where it's like, I want to take onus of what I'm doing rather than it taking onus of me. And so, for one example, I missed my dad's graduation because I was coaching, and that is one of my biggest regrets. And I was like, do the players really remember me sacrificing that moment and that memory? No. And it's like, it was not even like my group of players either. It was a group of players which I was doing on the behalf of another club which they were paying for. I was like, was it really worth that 15 quid I got paid? No. Did I miss out on the memories? Yes. And do the players remember it? No. And do the staff who I work with remember? No, because none of them are there no more. So in the grand scheme of things, I was the one who lost out. And I think that's the important message there, not to miss out and lose out on moments which are important.
Yeah, for sure. All things have to come with balance, whether it's coaching, whether it's playing, whether it's, your personal life and this and that and the other. Like, if you had every day to sit home and watch TV, you'd go crazy. Like, you have to do something. But, like, all good things in moderation. Like, it's a saying for a reason, and that one is probably more true than some of the other sayings people throw around. Like, finding that balance, finding that moment to pause. Part of it is the reflection piece, and part of it is, like, you can't see it if you're always stuck in it. Like, you have to get yourself away from it. You create more clarity. So if you are someone that's like, oh, I feel guilty, I can't walk away, it's like, no, you're going to be better off for it. Because all the stuff that you can't see because you're stuck in the middle, you get that bird's eye view when you actually start to take a step back. So if you really want to be better at reflecting and doing this and that, in my opinion, you have to walk away from it at a certain point and go read a book, go outside, go do something fun, go wander in a mall, even if you don't buy anything. Like, just get away with it, like, get away from it enough that you're able to then come back and have that perspective. So in a way, the moments you're granting yourself, you can even twist them into, well, this is actually for my job. Like, I'll have a better perspective when I come back if I actually take the time away. And I know that, like, that guilt of not doing enough, yeah, I can definitely
empathize with that one. But I've come to realize that like, nah, I'm probably better off when I take a break and then I come and I look at it with fresh eyes, or I walk away from it and I shut the computer and I just go do something that has nothing to do with it. I'm going to be better off for it in the end, and I'm going to have a better perspective on it later anyways.
And that's something which I'm big on, and something which I know has been heavily criticised on Instagram. And it's what Gary Neville calls mini retirements. So I try to make sure every half term I go away for the weekend, or I'll just go and do something away from home and coaching and work, and just go out and be at the nice country park, or maybe hit a beach, or try to do something where it's a nice day out. Like today's stunning, so it'd be the perfect day. And that mini retirement is just switching off, getting your mind off things, and just being refreshed, and then going back in on Monday going, yeah, I'm ready to go again. And that's what you need, because sometimes we get into that grudge and we're like grind, and then we're grinding ourselves down with it, and then we're burnt out, and then we're like, oh, I've got to do this, and rather than going, yeah, I can do this, yeah, that's great. So for me, mini retirements I'm big on. I agree with Gary, and I think they're important.
Absolutely. It's got to be. You can't do it all the time. No one is the Energizer Bunny. Like, that's just not real. And the people that show you that side of it, again, it's social media, it's doctored, it's what it is. It's the marketing, it's how they're branding themselves. And like, as a media person, like a marketing person, that's my thought on it. I'm sure there are people that do far more work than I ever realized, that they never post anything on social media and you wouldn't know. And they're probably working twice as hard as the person that has to post a video once a day to show you that they're working. Like, no, do you in the time that you need, in the space that you have, like, and then let it all fall into place together. It can't just be all of one and none of anything else. You gotta have some moments of reprieve and some moments of just, I don't know, perspective. You learn a lot from other things. So don't lose out on those chances to learn and improve by trying to do just the one thing that somebody says you have to do all the time.
Well, Lora, we've been going for an hour and 47, maybe longer than you've anticipated and planned in for, but you've said so many great points, so I didn't want to cut you off on any, and you've just done so well. And I know I've taken up, almost 2 hours of your time, and you're thinking, oh, maybe when's this finishing? But if I could throw some quick fire questions at you before you go, I would appreciate that.
All right, let's go for it.
If you had to have someone describe you in 3 words, what 3 words would they be?
Repeat that one more time.
If you had to have someone describe you in 3 words, what 3 words would they be?
I'm probably gonna get some type of like nerdy or dorky. Like, it's fair. I own it as a chem major. I'm definitely gonna get sarcastic. And then you kind of joked about it. I'm not a morning person. People are gonna call me out on being a night owl all the time.
Love it. If you could move to any country and coach, where would it be?
I think Spain is probably an obvious answer, but I would still go for it. Been there as a tourist, haven't been there as a coach. Would love the opportunity to see the soccer side a bit more.
I think that would be great. And out of the two of the conversations I've had, you both said Spain. So who knows? There might be an influx of American coaches taking over the Spanish way. If you could spend a day with any coach or manager, who would it be?
I'm gonna go Emma Hayes. I like her perspective, and I think she does a great job at what she does. So to see the backside of it would be, that peek behind the curtain would be really cool.
If you could manage any player, who would it be?
I don't know on that one. I think there would probably be players that I would feel too daunted to manage. I'm happy with what I do. I love the little ones, so I'm okay with that. I don't have to have a big name. It'd be cool to work with them and see how they do it, but it might not be the one for me.
I love that. What a true answer, an authentic answer as well. Who was or is your role model?
One that I go to a lot is Mike Dickey. He was my technical director for a long time in Kentucky. He's done a ton at all levels of the game, internationally, youth, collegiate, just who he is and how he's gone about his career. He's been an incredible sounding board for me, and someone that I still come back to on a tough day to say, like, hey, can you give me a tip? Can you give me an ear? And he's there. So he's someone I appreciate a lot in my coaching journey.
Another authentic answer, and I love that. To be a full-time professional footballer or a full-time professional coach?
I'm way too out of shape to consider playing now, so we're going coach for sure on that one.
If you were to go back to your younger self and the 2 cards were presented, what one do you think you would have gone for?
I think young me says player. Me with a little more perspective is like, nah, it's a lot. Let's be a coach and let's settle in.
Love it. If what is one job you would take if you had any choice of job out there?
I think within U.S. soccer, especially on the women's side, getting involved with like a youth national team or something at that level would be incredible to see. Again, it's not like I don't know if that would be the only job, but that's one that always sticks out just with the strength of the U.S. women's program. Like if you got a chance to step into that room, why would you not?
Love that. If you weren't coaching, what else would you be doing? I know you've mentioned marketing, but say you weren't in the coaching world at all. Is there anything else?
It would probably be kind of like an art, archaeology, chemistry overlap. That was what my research was in undergrad, and it was a really cool way to do something different.
If you weren't coaching soccer, what other sport would you be coaching?
I played basketball the most growing up, so it would probably be basketball.
Love that. Who is your all-time favourite footballer?
I mean, can't go wrong with Messi, can you?
Good choice. And now he's in America as well, even better.
It's a price point that a youth soccer coach cannot attain right now. So we will see how that one goes. But I am in closer proximity to him now than ever before.
That's it. You can take that. What is your biggest pet peeve?
Well, now that you asked, I feel like I don't have any. But as soon as we move on, I'll have a ton. I don't know on that one. I think you've stumped me on the quick recall portion of that piece.
And what is one thing you enjoy most about coaching?
The smile that you see when it clicks for a kid. That moment of understanding when the light bulb goes off and they just kind of get that face, and you can see it. That's the one. That's better than any of the goals or anything else, because that's like you've done your job. They're taking this. It makes sense. Like it's beautiful.
I love that, and that is a fantastic way to finish such a great episode. And whilst I'm watching the time tick up, I think by the time I do an intro and do editing, I think you will be dethroning the record holder for the longest episode, which is a great thing in itself, because this is content filled. And honestly, as I've been making notes and scribbling, and I'll watch this back and I'll do so much, I think this is such an amazing episode. But honestly, I'll have to check the timings on it, but I think I've been watching it go up and I'm like, getting there. But I think that's a huge accolade in itself. But I really appreciate your time, especially if it's run longer than you're expected, and just how quickly we had this organised. Just, message last night and boom, next day on. I really appreciate it, and it hasn't been a regret or a non-use of time. It has been a wonderful content-filled episode, and I know your players are very lucky to have you, but I really do appreciate your time, especially on a downtime, to fill it up and take off 2 hours. But it's a big thank you from me.
No, thank you. It's nice to chat soccer, and the timing worked out, so why not hop in and share a bit? So hopefully it is a great time well spent, and you listen back and you're not like, wow, that lady just rambled for 2 hours. But it was fun. I appreciate it. Absolutely
not. There's so many takeaways, and I think it's going to be a big list. But no, I really do appreciate it. Get some downtime now, and good luck for the week ahead, and we'll stay in touch. But thank you very much from me.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome, and have a great rest of your evening as well.
Thank you very much. I'll see you later.
Yep.